What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to Studs and Duds, the most comprehensive NFL player review series on the internet. I am your host, Marcus Whitman. Today we have the NFC edition of our season finale on Studs and Duds. We're going to get right into it, but first I do ask, this series takes a lot of time and effort from me, so if you could return the favor for just a second, hit that like button down below. It really does help support my channel and this series. If you enjoy Studs and Duds, it's a great way to support it. Takes just a second. And if this is your first time in, what we're going to do here today, we're going to be going team by team, talking about the rising and falling players from around the NFL. And while we do that, I will be showing you the ratings changes from my own custom Madden roster, a roster I've been making for the community since 2016. And I always like to tell people, these ratings, while coming from a video game, do show how I perceive these players in real life. And these ratings changes are a reflection of my own film study, analysis, and research. So let's go ahead and get started. And buckle up for our first team here, because the Detroit Lions have absolutely earned the right to go first here with the crazy ascension that this team has seen on both sides of the ball over the last about 2 months of football. So let's start with Aiden Hutchinson, the star of the month, completely woke up. And I know Lions fans might be like, he's been doing this all season. He had a 3-sack game in week 2. No, Carson Wentz just happened to walk into him a couple times. No, he has completely turned a corner, literally getting around that edge. Going back, really, it started, I would say, week 13 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where his pressure rate began to skyrocket. And ever since then, it's been week after week, persistent pass rush and just highlight wins where you see him setting up moves, bringing out different inside-out moves, and everything that he brought to the table at Michigan is showing up for the Lions. I think, Lions fans might feel slighted because I said Sauce should be the runaway defensive rookie of the year, and I'll stand by that. But Aiden Hutchinson is having a typical defensive rookie of the year season. He has been that immediate impact that you could have hoped for here in year one, putting up 53 pressures and 11 sacks on the season. That's low-end edge one production there. So just a tip of the cap to Aiden Hutchinson for sticking with it. A lot of rookies hit a rookie wall. Well, not Aiden Hutchinson. He only got better as the year went on. But let's talk about this offense, and Jared Goff deserves a tip of the cap himself. And a lot of Lions fans were upset that Goff didn't even receive an honorable mention when I did my quarterback power rankings video several weeks ago. But I honestly think that in this winning streak, weeks 13 through 18, he has played much better football, whereas earlier on in the season, he was actually a key reason for losses for the Detroit Lions, was making way too many mistakes. But in this time frame here, weeks 13 through 18, he's just straight up been a different quarterback. He's making bigger throws, he's missing less throws, and most importantly, he's taking much better care of the football, and he deserves to go up for that. I mean, this is the former number 1 overall pick. He's going to be the day 1 starter for the Lions. He's made it so that they don't have to desperately get a quarterback. I mean, what's not to like about the way Jared Goff played and finished the season? He outdueled Aaron Rodgers straight up in a Week 18 game that unfortunately wasn't enough for Detroit to make the playoffs because this team deserved it. So Goff's going to get a very nice +2 for him. And then Jamal Williams just running his ass off. I love the acceleration. His vision, I think, has taken a next step through his confidence, just getting better this year. 17 touchdowns on the season. But a lot of those, he obviously gets good blocking, and a lot of them are just 2-yard runs and stuff. But there's a lot of those touchdown runs as well, along with some short yardage conversions where it does feel like there's nothing there. And he just is patient to let the blocks develop, and then he's good to accelerate through the holes where he uses that size to his advantage. So Jamal Williams going to go up +3. You got a nice 1-2 punch there with him and DeAndre Swift. And then DJ Chark as well. We actually lowered him in the last week's episode of Studs and Duds. him along with I would like to call out Taylor Decker right now. Both these two players have been notably better in this week 13 through 18 stretch that I think have really helped Jared Goff play better. DJ Chark, most notably, or most known for his deep threat ability, has kind of brought that back. He's made some really big catches down the field, not just separating, but coming down with some tough contested catches as well. And I think for him, it was just a matter of confidence, getting back into a swing of things where he really had a falling out in Jacksonville. And he's definitely a free agent that Detroit should prioritize. He was brought in on kind of a one-year prove-it deal. I think he proved that he can still be that guy that he was in Jacksonville and could continue to climb next year. With Jamison Williams next to him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, you really can't ask for a better combination of weapons there as far as skill set is concerned. They all play off each other really well. And then you have Khalif Raymond also really becoming a focal point of this offense. He is this team's sort of Isaiah McKenzie, where he gets lost. He's 5'8", but they can do a little bit of everything. Occasionally, they'll scheme him up on a deep target, but more often than not, he's their motion guy. He can, teams are so focused on Amon-Ra St. Brown getting these quick underneath targets that Khalif Raymond can just kind of sneak in there, but he's had really good route running. He's been extremely reliable with his hands. And for a fourth wide receiver with this group, Detroit just does everything right, man. I'm so jealous of the way this team is run, and it's so fun to see this thing come together. These two tight ends have played adequately. Brock Wright, James Mitchell, a couple of young guys, good athletes. They've done their job. They don't ask much of them. They don't target them a whole lot. Neither are great blockers, but both Wright and Mitchell have had some nice receptions in this time. And then we talked about Taylor Decker. He just straight up the first half of the season was not playing up to his standards as honestly one of the better pass protecting left tackles in the NFL. And when you go from week 13 on, he's been locked down at left tackle. So I don't know if he was battling through an injury or what, but I do believe his reemergence as a premium left tackle has been a major contributor to the success of Jared Goff and potentially DJ Chark in turn as that deep threat to buy more time. And then Penei Sewell continues to get better. Love Penei Sewell. We all love Penei Sewell. The lead blocks, the impact blocks, that all stands out. But he has consistently improved as a pass protector since he came into the league. This is, quite frankly, God, it's tough because Philadelphia is nice too, but this is right there for the best tackle duo in the NFL. And then we return to the defense. So many players contributing to just an ascension of this defense. There's no other way around it. They started to defend the run better, really outside of that Panthers game, and started to defend the pass better in large part because of these pass rushers. But you've got Aleem McNeil up front. I honestly thought about making him star of the month, but Aiden Hutchinson was just so special. Aleem McNeil popped for me when I was prepping for the Lions deep dive, and this front four was deprived of talent last season. So for Aleem McNeil as a defensive tackle in an NFL where rookies it's borderline impossible to hit on rookie defensive tackles in the NFL. I take that back. It's borderline impossible to get these guys to step in and look like good players immediately. It's a position that typically takes a lot of time. But Aleem McNeil, as the year went on last year, was getting after the quarterback, was shedding blocks, and he didn't grade out particularly well when it came to PFF and all that stuff because there were losses on there because there wasn't anyone else drawing attention. But Aleem McNeil this year has just elevated his game to new heights. I mean, he has been dominant against the run in the last 4 or 5 weeks. He's been all over running backs in the backfield. He's such a unique blend of size and quickness and athleticism. I really thought he was a steal when they drafted him, and that has proved out correctly. And he had a little mini breakout this year. I think people are starting to realize how good he is, but I really think Aleem McNeil is a player that next year could take another step towards getting into that sort of, top defensive tackle cluster. Like, I don't want to name names and get ahead of myself here, but he has all of the athletic tools in the world. I've seen him win with different finesse moves. I've seen him win with bull rushes. I love his instincts off the ball as a run defender. I'm just raving about Aleem McNeil, and Aiden Hutchinson deserves his credit, but Aleem McNeil is a big part of why you should be optimistic about this front. because it's harder to find interior defensive linemen than it is edge guys. These rotational guys, Buggs and Jones and Kaminsky, all these guys have played really well within their role. They ask all these guys to do a little bit of everything and just get nasty, play physical, play fast. All these guys are pretty good athletes, especially John Kaminsky. I want to ring my own bell here for a second. I shouted him out in the Lions deep dive, said don't sleep on him as a guy that Atlanta probably shouldn't have given up on so quickly. Kaminsky now has 44 pressures on the season. Like, he's been a real nice role player for them. Kind of that hybrid defensive end type. So I like what I've seen from him. He should be back next year. And then James Houston continued his stretch, really turned it into a stretch, I should say, because the last episode was week 12. And that was when he got his first sack, when we first kind of learned who James Houston was. And then he went on a tear, put up 8 sacks on the season, broke some rookie record for consecutive games with a sack. And I don't really know what to do with James Houston. He's a undersized, 6 foot, barely 240 pound edge rusher, although I think he is 240. He seems to have beefed up from his college days. But what do you do with a guy that has under 100 pass rush snaps and 8 sacks? And when those wins were actually impressive, so if nothing else, he's an interesting situational guy. I would just say, like, I don't know how much hype there actually is on James Houston. I would just say buyer beware. It does remind me a little bit of a player the Eagles once had in Gennard Avery, who burst onto the scene as a day 3 pick, had a massive spike in pass rush production, and then just wasn't able to establish himself as a full-time player. I'm not saying that's going to happen with James Houston. I just don't fully know what to do with him because he's such a unique player and such unique production, such an outlier here. But if nothing else, he deserves to go up, and the guy can win one-on-one reps. I think that much is very clear. So he's going to be a very fascinating player to see. Like, how do they value him? Do they think they need another premium edge rusher, or do they feel like this combination of Kaminsky and Houston and these other bodies they have, like Charles Harris, is that going to be enough? It's definitely going to be something to monitor into the offseason for Detroit. One thing I do think is pretty clear is that Romeo Okwara is kind of an afterthought here. So he was like the first thing that this regime did was pay Romeo Okwara. And ever since then, he hasn't really been able to play. He's played under 300 snaps in the last 2 seasons. And what's really concerning is when he did get healthy this year, he got back out there. He wasn't really doing anything. He wasn't winning pass rush snaps. He wasn't defending the run well. If he's lost half a step, he could just be bad now because he's not a great athlete. He really isn't. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a cut candidate this offseason. We'll see what they want to do with him, but I think he's kind of on the back burner right now. Then we've got the linebacker room playing well. Malcolm Rodriguez just been very steady all season long. I think you do see some occasional plays where the size disadvantages do hurt him as far as getting overmatched by linemen or missing tackles. But those are rare circumstances. Like, he's just a very steady, smart, aggressive linebacker, and he's only a rookie. Like, this is a position that does typically take time for him to come in and be a very solid starter right away as a 5th round pick. What a find he was for Detroit. And then I think Derek Barnes, I don't know if I would say he's earned a starting job next year, but I will say this, don't bring Alex Anzalone back. Anzalone played fine down the stretch, but either bring a different guy in here with more upside or just let Derek Barnes play, because he actually defended the run really well this season. I think he took his role very seriously for a guy that this staff just doesn't seem to love him. Otherwise, I think they would be playing him over Anzalone, because this, in theory, is a really nice athletic duo with one guy's just really big and physical, and Malcolm Rodriguez, I mean, they're both fast, but Rodriguez a little bit more fluid of an athlete. So in theory, these two guys could be a really nice long-term linebacker duo. They're both young and athletic. I think Barnes did everything this team asked of him, and we'll see how they view him heading into the offseason. And then into the secondary, Will Harris has played well, man. He was a safety coming out of Boston College, right? And just hasn't played a lot of corner in his career here, but he was a 3rd round pick. He's extremely athletic, playing his best football in the last month of the season here. I don't think he's a day 1 starter or anything, but if things are clicking for him, there are tools there where he could be a legitimate starting corner for this team. And then Kirby Joseph, he actually had a little bit of a rookie wall there, I think. Weeks 14 through 17, wasn't really making a lot of plays, was missing some tackles, was actually way out of position on a couple big pass completions against the Bears, against the Panthers, against the Jets. But he responds against his son, Aaron Rodgers, in Week 18. Should have had 2 interceptions and made a great break for a pass breakup on a third. People said that one should have been intercepted. The range and ability for him just to get to that ball, I'm pretty sure it was either cover 2 or cover 6. Rodgers was trying to hit the honey hole, and he makes a break out there and lays out for a big pass deflection that would have been an interception or a touchdown. So he brings out his best against Aaron Rodgers, that's for damn sure. But it wasn't just Green Bay where he played well this season. They've found themselves a rangy playmaking safety back there, in just an incredible addition of talent across the board this year. And even Deshaun Elliott, they would be at a loss without him, because Tracy Walker went down after Week 3. And they needed another starter there. Elliott has his physical limitations. He hasn't been a flashy player. He's not a incredibly rangy safety or some great cover guy. But he is a damn smart safety. He's really improved his tackling security as well. For him to be a third safety is honestly ideal for anybody, and a great backup that can do a little bit of everything. So he deserves a shout out. I mean, he's a good player. He's just never going to be a whole lot better than where we've got him right now. So there's your Lions. Now, before we get to our next team here, I got to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. I'm sure you guys have all seen the screenshots of their daily pick'em contests, and I love those. But now that playoffs are here, well, you've got a few days left to head to Underdog and sign up for their playoff best ball contest, where you are drafting new teams. If you're like me and you went 0 for 4 in your fantasy playoffs, well, I'm not ready to be done with fantasy football, so I'm going to go play some playoff best ball at Underdog Fantasy, where you're drafting new teams for massive payouts. And the coolest thing to me is you need to not just draft the players that'll do the best, but the players on the teams that will do the best. So it's like a double predictive thing that I'm just super looking forward to. So this is all at Underdog Fantasy. I vouch for them. I swear by Underdog. I've been playing all year long, and now you can too. If you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code TFG, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. That is promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. Next up, the Green Bay Packers, who went on a little bit of a run in this time frame just to fall short against those Detroit Lions. But the star of the month, Christian Watson, really kind of saving the Packers season in a lot of ways. I know they fell short, but the difference with this offense, with and without him, was just astronomical. Not just the plays himself that he made, the big plays, the contested catches, which was certainly, I think, the biggest surprise. I mean, we all knew he could separate deep and be explosive with the ball in his hands, but he made multiple big-time go-get-it big boy catches. You talk about another 6'5" receiver on this team like Allen Lazard. Watson making catches that Lazard just doesn't make, and Rodgers starting to develop some of that trust with him. None bigger than that big one against Detroit, although there was the touchdown catch against the Bears in Week 13 that honestly kind of sparked a comeback in that game and in the season. So while there is a lot of negativity around Green Bay, Christian Watson is one of the better picks of the draft, and we don't need to revisit my problems with how Brian Gutekunst drafted, but clearly that individual move to go up and get Christian Watson was worth it. So a lot of optimism for him, at least. Now, Aaron Rodgers is going to come down, and a lot of people think I'm an Aaron Rodgers apologist, and honestly, I certainly am, but he just straight up is not the same quarterback. And, I think physically speaking, there is a bit of a drop-off, but it's not a crazy drop-off, I don't think. And you also have to note the broken thumb. We'll see. We'll see where he plays next year, if he plays, all that. If the accuracy improves next year, he certainly could turn things around a little bit there. But the biggest thing with me with Aaron Rodgers is actually the mental side of things. The lack of decisiveness in the passing game, the hesitancy to trust receivers. A lot of times in these big moments, like straight up, I'll admit it now, like this and the Niners game last year, he just doesn't feel like that same quarterback that's going to go out and make plays happen at the end of the game. He gets tunnel vision. He seems to overthink things. I don't know what it is, but it's unfortunate that this is the version of Rodgers that a lot of people and certainly a lot of young football fans are going to remember, because he spent the wide majority of his career as a literal fire-breathing dragon in clutch moments. But that's not who Aaron Rodgers is anymore. Can he come back and play at a higher level than he did this year and, prove people wrong again? Yeah, absolutely. But this is a warranted fall. And, the last thing I want to say about Rodgers, because this is a big one, is he was not a horrible quarterback this year. I think the 88 rating we have there, definitely a lot of his resume and the potential for him to turn things around is cooked into that, as it is with someone like Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson this year. But he still played around the level of a top 10 to 12 quarterback this season. I do firmly believe that. All of the metrics back that up, but that's not what he's paid to play as, right? He's paid to play as the best quarterback in the NFL, and he's paid to play as an elite top 5 quarterback. So that is a problem in its own right for Green Bay. And let's move on. So one more player on the offense, Zach Tom. Another saving grace for this draft class that's just all over the place with hits and misses, it feels like. But man, you find Zach Tom in the 4th round, who I felt like was a steal on draft night. He's been a rock at tackle, whether it's the left tackle, right tackle. He's played left guard. He's played right guard. He could even play center if they wanted him to. It was pretty much universal agreement that this was a total steal, and his play in his rookie season has backed that up. I mean, you just don't find better athletes at the tackle position, and you don't find more technically refined offensive linemen coming out, or certainly not a whole lot. The reason he fell is because he is, 295 pounds, 6'4". He doesn't fit and check all the boxes, but Brett Coleman thought Zach Tom was a 1st-round pick, and he's played like it this year. So if you just flip him and Quay Walker, like, you can kind of do some mental gymnastics and excuse Brian Gutekunst for a few things, which I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. And I think he's going to shit the bed again this offseason in certain ways, but he certainly does some nice stuff, right? Now we got to talk about this defense, because there was a lot of disappointment with this defense, and it's just tragic that they are bringing Joe Barry back, because I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for this to get a whole lot better next season. But they've invested a lot in this group, and a lot of these guys are not living up to their pay grade. So Dean Lowry, definitely on the way out. He eventually got benched. Like, it took maybe 3 months too long. I thought he should have been an offseason cut. They bring him back. All he did was steal development and playtime from Devontae Wyatt, who played better. But finally, week 17, week 18, they make him a rotational defensive lineman, getting 7 to 10 snaps. Dean Lowry was a huge part of why Green Bay was so astronomically bad against the run early on, because they put these D tackles in such a bind by playing so much nickel defense, but you have to do your job if they're going to ask you of that, and he was horrible at it. So Dean Lowry definitely going to be gone. He could play a rotational role for somebody, but I don't see him starting for anybody in the future. Let's just focus on the guys that did bad, and then we'll come back to the guys playing better. Preston Smith, he does this every other year, man. And maybe for Green Bay, you can be optimistic that this was a down year for him, and he's going to be better next year. If you look at his profile, it is a roller coaster, and it goes from great season to like average season. And this was an average season for Preston Smith. He wasn't a colossal disappointment, but needed to get dinged a little bit. He's going to be 30 next year. And you can just tell, when Rashawn Gary goes down, Preston Smith just doesn't feel like a number one either. Then Devondre Campbell, they give him the 5-year contract extension in Green Bay. someone that they picked off the street just a year ago. And I would say Campbell played somewhere between that street free agent and the breakout all-pro linebacker that he was last year. The coverage was actually still pretty good for Devondre Campbell, and he had that big interception against the Dolphins, so I don't want to take that away from him, but his run defense was another real liability for Green Bay, not just the inability to kind of dissect runs and be in the right place. He was out of position quite a lot, but also an inability to shed and get off blocks. So Campbell, you hope, can play better, but I think this is just kind of a little closer to who he really is. There were some questions on if he was going to be a one-year wonder. Not a one-year wonder, but certainly regressing a little bit back to the mean for what we know about who he's been throughout his career in multiple different stops. And then Adrian Amos, I would project the most pessimistic outlook on him. He played horrible this year. He turned into a pumpkin back there. A lot of the big coverage breaks for this defense were actually Adrian Amos's fault, which is not what you expect. I think he didn't just lose a half a step or a step. I think he lost 2 steps. He literally looked like a linebacker playing deep safety, and I just don't know if that gets better. He is turning 30. You never know when this is going to happen to these defensive backs, and maybe this is a wake-up call for him to sign a prove-it deal and get himself back in shape, but definitely a disappointing year for Adrian Amos in a contract year, which you just don't see that too often. Now, it wasn't all bad. A lot of these young players did step up and definitely earned themselves key roles next season, especially Daryl Slayton. He was probably the best run defender of the group for Green Bay's interior defensive linemen. He is the only one amidst that group that's over 320 pounds. He is a full-size nose tackle. I think they should have been using him more all along instead of a Dean Lowry. So hopefully that can be an upgrade for Green Bay next year. Kingsley Enagbare, just a really good, solid player. Just kind of everything I said he would be in the draft. There's some pros and cons here, right? Like, people thought he was a second-round pick. I thought he was a 5th-round guy. And then Kingsley Enagbare, he's I think, showing that he is a really high-floor, balanced edge player. He's been good in run defense. He's been adequate getting after the quarterback. Like, he is locked into me as an edge 3. Now, a lot of Green Bay things think he might be the future, and maybe you bring him back for a year behind Preston Smith with Rashawn Gary coming back, but he's not fast. He doesn't have a whole lot of juice and domination as a pass rusher. So I think that is eventually going to hold him back if you want to put him into a conversation to be a starter. But as a third edge player, it really doesn't get a whole lot better than Kingsley Enagbare because he does a little bit of everything and he just brings kind of this, he's like a heat wave off the bench coming in. And then these 2 linebackers, the young linebackers, Quay Walker, obviously boneheaded decision to shove a trainer, and I cannot defend that, but he has played much better. And for a pick that I was highly critical of, I still would not make this pick again. But he certainly developed as the year went on. I think from a run defense perspective, something clicked in the last 5 weeks of the season. You saw him gambling more against the run. You saw him out of position a whole lot more, or a whole lot less, rather, against the run, making plays in coverage, really getting after it as a blitzer. He did look like a new man around that Eagles game. So clean up the off-the-field stuff, the stupid-ass decisions, and Quay Walker can grow with the athletic tools he has, and maybe the embarrassment that he suffered in the last game of the year can ignite some extra incentive to get better as a player, and could ultimately be a good thing for Quay Walker long-term. Maybe that's an optimistic outlook, but an experience like that can reshape your work ethic, I think. And then I really like Isaiah McDuffie. I do. He was a big reason why I said don't draft Quay Walker, to be honest. He's an athletic dude out of Boston College. He was one of my guys in that draft, and they just really have never given him an opportunity, certainly not in his rookie season. And this year they've had Quay Walker and they've had Devondre Campbell, and even a guy in Chris Barnes who got a lot of playing time when Campbell missed a couple games. But they kind of slowly realized that Isaiah McDuffie is the better linebacker, at least between him and Chris Barnes. So, I think he's a guy that is learning the game and has some upside there as a third linebacker next year and a good special teamer. I think there's something there in Isaiah McDuffie. And then Keyshawn Nixon as well. Don't need to spend too much time on him. He's been freaking awesome returning kicks, but he has actually gotten in there in the slot. Minimal opportunities, but has looked good. I think he's a football player. He's a good piece to have around. Probably never going to be a starter or anything, but Green Bay should definitely make it a priority to bring him back as not just that big return man that's been just a big blessing for them. They've never had a guy like that, but as good secondary depth as well. And then just a couple quick shout-outs. Devontae Wyatt finally started to play like that first-round defensive tackle. He's an interesting guy because he just wasn't used, and it's just so weird. Like, what could his season have looked like if they gave him the amount of snaps that Dean Lowry got? Because he made plays against the run. He had some dominating pass rush wins, and he's definitely someone as he heads into year 2 that you hope can emerge as someone that was worth a first-round pick. And then Darnell Savage, such a rough season for him. Ends up getting hurt and benched and changed positions all over the place. Just a nightmare season for him all around. But in the last 3 weeks of the season, some injuries did allow him to get some more opportunities and made the most of them. So I don't know. I'm not fully believing in Darnell Savage at this point, but he did finish strong. Brief interlude. If you enjoy my analysis, I do want to remind you guys, I have a podcast, the Fully Inflated Football Show. If you want to hear me talk about football more, well, you can either head to the description down below, follow that link for our YouTube channel for the show, or just search Fully Inflated Football wherever you get your audio podcasts. Next, we have the Chicago Bears. Definitely got to squint and look a little harder to find the good in this team from this stretch of time. It was really hard to watch this squad, but they do have a star of the month. It is their rookie left tackle, Braxton Jones. For all of the talk about how much they need to add to this team, I don't think left tackle is one of those things. Braxton Jones clearly at this point is just a stud tackle that slipped through the cracks. A 5th-round pick out of Southern Utah, but he has athletic traits. In this time, he has really improved as a run blocker, but he's gone up against some really good pass rushes too. Preston Smith in Green Bay, no slouch, but Philadelphia, Buffalo, Detroit, Aiden Hutchinson did get him a couple times, to be fair. But then again, against the Vikings in Week 18, against that group, played his best stretch of football. So Braxton Jones at left tackle, seems the Bears have found a potential franchise guy, nice, in the 5th round. Now, the guy next to him, Cody Whitehair, it's not that he was horrible this season, but at 30 years old, did have one of his worst years. A couple of really ugly performances in this stretch. Gave up 4 sacks against the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's going to come down just 1, but I still expect him to be their left guard next season. Then over the defensive side of the ball, just some of these linebackers playing hard. Joe Thomas, hardly even worth our time talking about. He's a 31-year-old career special teamer, but got a lot of opportunities in the last month of the season and made the most of them. And then Matthew Adams, who followed Matt Eberflus over from Indianapolis, his snap count increased in the last month of the season, and he played all right, flying around, made some tackles. But the one that Bears fans are probably most excited about is going to be Jack Sanborn, who unfortunately gets injured in that Week 15 game against Philadelphia. His game was cut short, but he had 5 tackles already, just 30 snaps into the game. And he definitely looks like he can be a good run-defending linebacker. We haven't really seen a whole lot from him as far as like coverage and being a high-end starter and all that stuff. But I think Sanborn made a pretty strong case that he should be one of their 2 linebackers next year. And then into the secondary, Jalen Johnson, he had a couple of really impressive performances here. Week 13 against Green Bay did not give up a reception, was locked down, did have a penalty in that game. But then the really notable one was how good he was against Philadelphia, going really punch for punch with A.J. Brown, who's been just mossing dudes this year. And A.J. Brown certainly got his, but Jalen Johnson also had 3 pass breakups with some really impressive coverage snaps. So unfortunately, he gets hurt for the final month of the season, really. But they definitely feel good that he's going to be their CB1 heading into next year. And then good to see Kyler Gordon start to play a little bit better. He still has given up way too many plays this season. And as far as him being a perimeter starter on the outside, I'm just still not sold on his coverage ability. But I do think he can step into the slot next year and see some bigger gains. And I do think he showed some nice zone instincts. The interception he had on Jalen Hurts, he was in cover 3, kind of working back from the other side of the field against a deep post, and Jalen Hurts just didn't see him. He undercuts the route, gets a nice pick. So he isn't an instinctive physical player. It's just like man-to-man on the outside. I do think we definitely saw some long speed limitations from the second-round rookie out of Washington. And then Elijah Hicks has stepped in the last couple of weeks. Nothing too crazy, but made some nice plays coming downhill in run defense. He is a 7th-round rookie out of Cal. And then we wrap up the NFC North with the Minnesota Vikings. The star of the month has been a godsend in the secondary as they've battled through injuries there, not just with their rookies, but with Cameron Dantzler hasn't been able to stay out there, and we'll get to Chin and Sullivan in a little bit, but they have needed somebody to come out of nowhere and help them in that cornerback room, and that is exactly what Duke Shelley has done. And Shelley was really dubbed a slot corner coming out of Kansas State, was a 6th-round pick by the Chicago Bears, and Shelley's not the only former Bears day 3 pick that's playing well for this Vikings team. But they have played Duke Shelley on the perimeter this year by necessity, and he has low-key been one of the better corners in the entire, there's been so many good cornerback performances this season, but dude, Duke Shelley has 10 pass breakups on the season. One of those came in week 10 when he was a non-starter, but it was that great pass breakup in the corner of the end zone, I think against Stephon Diggs, that had him earned this playing time. 9 pass breakups in his 8 starts, has not allowed a touchdown, finishes up the season with an interception against the Bears. He's allowing just under 50% on his targets for completions for only 249 yards. He's been awesome. Like I said, a total godsend for this defense. Just add him to the list of 5'9" corners that when you give him an opportunity in an off-zone quarters-heavy system, they can thrive. So a great job by this Vikings front office and staff to pinpoint that and really salvage what could have turned into a disaster at that perimeter corner position. Now, let's talk about the offense a little bit here. So these receivers are going to be on the move. Jalen Naylor, the 6th-round pick, I believe, out of Michigan State, showing that he can play. I'm fascinated by this. He really wasn't utilized well at Michigan State in a very run-heavy offense, but he's shown an ability to get down the field. And in the last couple weeks, he's really produced. And normally he'd go up more, but you're talking about garbage time production against the Packers backups, and then, some production against the Bears defense in a really weird game. So I don't want to overreact, but he made a couple catches earlier in the year as well that were nice. Like, he's interesting. I think he's making a case to be, maybe someone that gets legitimate playing time next year. Because the last couple weeks, I wouldn't even describe that as legitimate playing time, right? The Vikings are resting their starters in the second half. They pull their starters against the Packers. Well, maybe he should be in the mix a little bit more. Then KJ Osborne, gonna go up. Osborne certainly hasn't filled the destiny of becoming this team's wide receiver too, like a lot of Vikings fans thought that he was going to. But in the last several weeks, and starting really with that Colts game where he blew up onto the scene, kind of salvaged his season with that game, honestly. Still only gonna come in under 700 yards on his regular season, but Osborne can play. He's a good wide receiver 3. Can line him up outside and inside where he can win. Reliable hands. So, he's a solid player. I do want to say, a lot of Vikings fans overrated him coming into the year. But unfortunately, Adam Thielen is going to continue to come down. And some of this is, we had him at an 86 coming into the year. And I didn't really know what to make of his season last year where he wasn't overly productive, but he was a little bit banged up, and I just didn't know, is he going to get his juice back? Is he starting to become more washed at 32 years old? And I think it's much more the latter. he still has a good pair of hands. He can still run routes. He's still a usable wide receiver, but that's about the extent of what you can say about Adam Thielen. He just does not have any juice in there. There's not an element of explosiveness in there. The biggest numbers I can throw out there, he's only made one defender miss, whereas he had 7 in 2021 for the year before that. His contested catch percentage has dropped from 66%, 40% really is kind of his career average, down to 20% this season. His yards per route run down to just 1.06, which is just not very good for a number 2 wide receiver. It's actually very, very poor for a number 2 wide receiver. So again, he's still usable, but I think he's entering the dog days of his career and probably should be viewed as more of a wide receiver 3, if not, maybe be contemplating retirement. I don't know. He just, again, no explosiveness there from Adam Thielen. Now, this offensive line has had their ups and downs. I guess the nice thing is the guys that have really struggled would be guys that... Now, this offensive line has certainly had their ups and downs, and Ed Ingram really continues to struggle at right guard. They've had backup center in there, but some of these guys continue to play well. Christian Darrisaw gets back from the concussion and resumes his domination of the NFL. He's on a mission this year. Darrisaw is just unbelievable. He never should have fallen as far as he did. That is just inexplicable to me. I thought he was a lock, top 12, top 15 pick in the draft. They were able to trade down and still get him. He's seriously been one of the best left tackles in the NFL this year. And then his running mate, Brian O'Neill, I wanted to give him some love as well. Now, he's going to get put on IR here. He's probably going to miss the rest of the playoffs here, I think, assuming they could even go on a run. We'll see. But O'Neill's been awesome as well. I mean, the Vikings have right up there with the Lions and the Eagles for the best tackle duo in the NFL. These guys are freak athletes. They're perfect scheme fits, and they are set up well. And they can really build around these two well into the future. So that's good. Oli Udoh, he's interesting. He started at right guard or left guard maybe. Yeah, I think it was right guard last season and was really bad. And they weren't even really sure if he was going to make the team, honestly. And he does. They move him back to tackle, which is his natural position. And very clearly, that was a good move. I mean, obviously, you want Brian O'Neill out there. We'll see how Udoh can handle Ojulari and Thibodeau this weekend. I'm not going to act like he's a superstar, but he has played much better than you would expect coming in at right tackle. And if he can play like he did against Kingsley and Agbury and whatever the Bears were rolling out week 18 against a much better group, then you can start to take this a little bit more seriously. But you at least got to commend him for stepping in as a backup and holding down just fine at right tackle. We'll see how that lasts. And then Ezra Cleveland at left guard, you got to keep raising him for his run blocking. He has been using his force powers, see who gets that reference, to move guys there at left guard. Another just incredible athlete. He's perfect for this wide zone blocking system. But it is worth noting he has been a borderline liability in pass protection all season. So you look at him, you look at Bradbury / a backup center, you look at Ed Ingram, who's not going to move this week, but he's been terrible all season in pass protection, and Oli Udoh, a backup right tackle in there. How do they fare against that Giants pass rush? It's going to be a matchup to watch, to say the least. And then you look at the rest of the defense here. Definitely just a lot of kind of low-level role players moving up here. So James Lynch, he's fascinating to me. We've talked about him quite a bit. He's been slowly rising. I liked him coming out of Baylor, but he played in one of those Big 12 3-3-5 defenses, and he played kind of an edge defensive end hybrid role for them, where he was actually one of the most productive interior defensive linemen in that draft class from a pass rush perspective. Well, here in Minnesota, he's been one of the least productive pass rushers in the entire NFL. He's played, I think, close to 200 pass rush snaps this season, just 3 pressures. But he, to me, looks bigger than he did at Baylor, looks much stronger, and it's being reflected in his run defense, where you do see him making plays in the backfield. So you'll take that as a role-playing defensive tackle to be able to be a factor in the run defense. And then Khyiris Tonga, we mentioned that Duke Shelley was not the only former Bear making a name for himself on this Vikings defense. And Tonga was kind of a nice space-eating, run-defending nose tackle at BYU, and he's been doing that very well for the Vikings. Gets his revenge on the Bears for not really giving him a chance with that new regime in Week 18 with his best performance of his career. So I do think he can play. And just a couple of nice, just rotational defensive linemen there behind Phillips and Tomlinson. And then Brian Asamoah, I will hold my hand up and say this was not a pick that I liked. And he still has a long way to go for sure, but he has played really well. He has the run and chase, strip, fumble recovery, just a really athletic play that he made against the Giants that was kind of eye-opening. But he's been earning more playing time, which was not going to be easy for him because they have obviously a couple of veteran linebackers ahead of him. But to me, this is kind of the formula for linebacker in the NFL right now. Take an athlete in the mid-rounds, force them to develop and learn the position, earn that playing time instead of gifting these more raw athletes playing time right out the gate. And this could prove to be a good long-term formula for the early third-round pick out of Oklahoma. And then Chandon Sullivan hinted at this earlier, but a lot of the Vikings, issues defensively come back to him, and a lot of them really come back to this scheme. But I tried to tell Vikings fans in their deep dive when they signed Chandon Sullivan that a best case scenario is that he does not stick around as this team starter. I get it as a Band-Aid. They needed someone with experience, but Chandon Sullivan is an undrafted pickup that had a flash in the pan season for Green Bay that had some really bad moments in Green Bay, and they were excited to let him go because if a smart team can pick on him, he just can't really cover. He doesn't have size, he doesn't have speed, he doesn't have instincts, and really from start to finish, he's been a liability for Minnesota. He's given up almost 1,000 yards on the season, 833 to be exact, which is the most in the NFL. Just behind Xavier Howard and Kyler Gordon, by the way, in case you were wondering. Diamador Lenore. Those are your worst corners in the NFL this year, if you will, from a yardage perspective, but it really shows with Sullivan, man. I would be curious, do you really want to roll him out there against the Giants, a smart team that's going to find a matchup problem? I picked the Giants to win this weekend. I just want to say, if the Giants win, the formula is take advantage of this interior offensive line, put pressure on Kirk Cousins, and pick on Chandon Sullivan in that, soft zone, flat area. Keep an eye on it. Now, Josh Metellus, the day 3 safety out of Michigan, has earned a lot of playing time here. He's been rotating in. He's made some really nice plays in coverage. Known for more of his run defense at Michigan, but he's shown some range and instincts back there. Now, I think he's been responsible for at least one of the several coverage busts that this team has had. I can't really defend that. It's hopefully a learning experience for him. But beyond that, he's made some nice plays and can carve out a role maybe next year. And now we move on to the NFC Beast, the NFC East this year, with the Washington Commanders and the star of the month here, really month and a half, honestly. We're going back to week 13 here, but Jamin Davis has, I think, turned a corner, and he was one of the hardest watches in his rookie year last year. First round pick here for Washington, just was not ready for the speed of the game. Missed tackles, blown assignments, was a true liability for Washington last year. But this year, out the gate, there was still some coverage issues, and he has been far from perfect this year. But you obviously hope that a former first-round pick can figure some stuff out and start to play faster and make less mistakes. And that's exactly what they've seen now from Jamin Davis, to the point that I think you can hope for a massive leap into year 3. Still going to be the same system with Ron Rivera there. The biggest thing to me is just the tackling consistency. His missed tackle rate has been cut in half. And in the last 6 starts for him, only missing 1 tackle. So, that is just an indication to me that the speed of the game has been better. He's been in better position, because missed tackles more often than not means you're putting yourself in a bad angle and making the tackle harder on yourself. So he's been in better position. You're seeing more defensive stops. You're seeing him in position to make those big plays in the backfield. And in the last 4 starts for him, not giving up the same amount of big plays and coverage that he has in his past. So really heating up late in the season, building some momentum into year 3 for the former first-round pick. Now, let's talk about this offense because it was a really ugly 6-week stretch here, and it does start, to me, with Carson Wentz, who's going to come down really towards more of that, like, grade range of your backups and kind of your bridge quarterback types, and that's really what he is at this point. I don't see anybody looking at Carson Wentz as a surefire starter next year. I expect him to be released from Washington here. He was horrible, and I just think the mental side of things for him have completely disappeared, and he was never a surgeon or anything, but he can't hang in a pocket comfortably. I think all of the talk and all of the mistakes and all of the injuries and everything, the poor offensive lines, everything has caught up to him to the point that he's detrimental to himself and his team. So it's just ugly. It speaks for itself. He's got to come down. He still has tools. He's still big, has a good arm, can move. But yeah, it's just not working here. Brian Robinson's going to come up. Honestly, I wasn't blown away by what he did, but just the sheer workload, the volume, like you got to bump him up just because of production, really. I mean, it's not that he was horrible or anything, but I don't know. He to me, if he peaks out, it's going to be as a solid starter. I don't really see him as like some super juiced up superstar, but he's a nice back for sure. Jahan Dotson played really well into next season to wrap up his year. You're looking at a couple of former first round picks here, Jamin Davis, Jahan Dotson, looking like hits at this point, or at least Davis trending in that direction. Dotson for sure. The vertical explosiveness from Jahan Dotson really standing out as well. And I think in an offense, hopefully into the future, where they can have maybe a quarterback that can play a little bit better in structure, and they can really design routes for someone like Jahan Dotson, I think you'll see more production as far as the short game, the short to intermediate game. Because right now, when you think about what Jahan Dotson did, it was making big catches down the field, showing verticality. It's good to know that that's in there, but I think he's just getting started. We're going to ding all these veterans here that were not good for Washington this year. Charles Leno at left tackle, he was the best of this group, and he's still a good left tackle, but the thing with Charles Leno, and this follows him back to Chicago, because he's not a great athlete, when he loses really bad. And fans really go to Charles Leno as a scapegoat in a lot of ways. And he's got a lot of great games, and I still like Charles Leno, and he should definitely be back as their left tackle. But my God, Nick Bosa put him in the wood shop and took him to work, because that was ugly. And he just overall has not had his best season. So he's going to come down a little bit. But these other guys, Trey Turner, really regressing back to the guy he was before. He was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year was kind of a career redemption season for him, but has not been that guy here in Washington. I don't expect him to be back. Wes Schweitzer, who's had a couple of good years here for the Commanders, enters the year as a backup. He's had to play center because of a bunch of injuries there, and he's been really rough there, so he's going to come down. And then Logan Thomas, another one of these players where you just look back on their season, it's like, what exactly is it that you did here? Because he was a horrible run blocker for this team, very minimal pass production, no explosive plays. There's a couple games these last couple weeks, Commanders fans might say, against the Niners, he had 6 receptions against the Browns. That was dink and dunk crap that those defenses were giving them. And that was enough to salvage a 323-yard season. He's got it under 1 yards per route run. The dude's 32. He had a flash in the pan season as a converted quarterback, and it was fun to see. But I don't think anyone can look at Logan Thomas as a starter at this point, including Washington. Then we flip over to the defense, and Jonathan Allen, what the actual shit? Where did he go? I mean, seriously. Week 15 against the Giants, you have a huge game. Gets 32 attempts to rush the quarterback against a non-dominant Giants offensive line. 0 pressures. Week 16 against the San Francisco 49ers, same thing. Rough interior offensive line. 0 pressures on 25 pass rush snaps. 0 pressures against the Cleveland Browns. This is someone I perceive as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. To go 3 straight. Now, granted, he did get hurt against the Browns, so he only had 11 snaps there. So a little bit less emphasis on that. But those are big games, right? The Niners game, the Giants game. This is your best player, and he shit the bed. I cannot explain it. Maybe he was hurt. Even the couple weeks before that, it was fine against the Giants in week 13. But the week before that against the Falcons, he has 2 pressures, no sacks on 23 snaps against the Falcons. Like, just a horrible season for Jonathan Allen. So you just can't have it. There's nothing else to say about it. He had to come down. Casey Tuhill played a nice role as a run defender. He's beefed up from his days at Stanford. Danny Johnson, just rewind everything I said about Duke Shelley and apply everything to Danny Johnson. Same exact situation. 5'9" corner, always pigeonholed into the slot, comes into a zone-heavy, Fangio-style, quarters-heavy system, plays off-zone coverage, and balls the fuck out. That's what Danny Johnson's doing. I've always liked Danny Johnson's game, and I think he can play slot corner, but it's really fun to see him playing on the outside. It is crazy to see all of these guys succeed, and it'd be funny to do a video on that. All these guys at 5'9" playing outside, playing well. It'd be funny because we trashed the Fangio system, but when it works and it does have its benefits, and these seem to be the guys that do it well, the 5'9" corners that have always had to rely on their IQ to be good at corner. They get to turn around and look at the quarterback and read out the routes, and they can use that quickness to break on balls. It's a thing, man, and teams are catching up to it. So Danny Johnson's been balling out. They've made some changes with this secondary that have worked really well for them. I want to shout out Bobby McCain, who is playing in the slot for them. These last 2 of the last 3 games, he started in the slot entirely. He has been a slot corner in years past. Just an incredibly versatile defensive back. I didn't think it was enough to raise him, but that could be a trio that works for them next year. I would honestly be fine with a trio of Kendall Fuller, who's playing awesome, by the way. Back-to-back should have been pick sixes against Dak Prescott, but he's just had a great season overall. So Kendall Fuller is your one. Danny Johnson getting an opportunity to be this team's sort of Darius Williams in a lot of ways. And then Bobby McCain in the slot, where I think he can be a very good slot corner. And then you can use Benjamin St. Juste as your matchup, press, disruptive guy. That can definitely work for me. So I like what they're doing on the back end there. And then Jeremy Reeves as well. They've had an injury to Cameron Curl, unfortunately, and Jeremy Reeves, the guy that they had that cool video of Ron Rivera, getting emotional, giving him the news that he made the Pro Bowl as a special teamer. And, Reeves, he's a great special teamer, obviously, and the league respects him for that, but he's done a valiant job as a backup over the last few years to just step in. He's not a great athlete. He's not a great cover safety, but he comes in, he plays his ass off, he tackles well, comes downhill and supports against the run. So he's had a couple of good starts in there in that regard. And then we didn't talk about Sam Howell, also in the notes there. I've got him rated as a 67. That's one of the best rated backup quarterbacks in my roster, if you will. And certainly was rated that well because I thought he was a value in the 5th round, and there's a lot of traits there. I wouldn't say he did anything in his Week 18 start that we don't know he's capable of. I always talked about how he's incredibly underrated as a runner, and they really tapped into that, and I love to see that. Always talked about how he throws really nice deep balls when given a chance, and that was the majority of his passing production was the dime down the field, I think, to Jahan Dotson there. So the traits on display from Sam Howell, I think the best thing to say about it is that he proved that he should not have gone in the 5th round, which I had him rated as a 5th round sleeper, right? But he played well. And I think he put himself in the conversation to be in the mix for that quarterback room. Now, if they bring in Derek Carr, there's no conversation. But say they draft a guy, or say they want to bring in, Jacoby Brissett or something like that. I don't know what this team's going to do, But in most situations, I think Sam Howell should be allowed to compete for that job. And if some of the mental stuff comes along, then there could be something there. You know, the guy completed 11 passes. It wasn't like some dynamic, insane performance, but I did like what I saw. Another interlude, over half of you that watch my videos are not subscribed to my channel. So I just want to remind you, if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this content, if you've made it this far into the video, you probably don't hate my stuff. So make sure you're subscribed. Just hit that sub button down below. It's free and it'll make sure you don't miss any of my stuff. So yeah, go subscribe. And now the Dallas Cowboys, their star of the month is going to be, really no surprise for Cowboys fans here, slot cornerback DaRon Bland, who did go up in the last episode, just one. He was just starting to kind of show that he could play a little bit, but if you look back now with hindsight, really since week 8, when Jordan Lewis, their starting slot corner, went down for the year, DaRon Bland, a 5th-round rookie out of Fresno State, has stepped in and honestly dominated. He's up to 5 interceptions on the year, many of those coming on legit good coverage plays, showing good trail technique in man coverage, showing zone instincts. He's been adequate as a run defender as a young rookie. So just another find in what is honestly going to go down as a historic rookie cornerback class. It's unbelievable, and that's another video concept right there. I'm going to just pause and take a note on a couple of these ideas, all related to cornerbacks too. But yeah, DaRon Bland's been awesome, getting some love here, and I think making a strong case to be their starting slot corner for the foreseeable future. Now, let's talk about this offense. Dak Prescott's got to come down, man. He is, for a quarterback who's supposed to be known for being one of the best processors, best decision makers in the league, he's just making way too many mistakes. None more notable than probably the worst game of his career against the Washington Commanders. Tried to throw a pick 6 on a late, poor read to the flat, and literally on the next play to Kendall Fuller, makes the exact same mistake, and it does hurt him for a pick 6. I just can't explain it. He's certainly had his good moments this year too, but like, it's just been crazy inconsistent. First half against the Jags was horrible. First half against the Titans was horrible. Played well in the second half of those games. But you look at him over the last month of the season, he has not played like a top 10 quarterback. He hasn't played like that great quarterback he's supposed to be. And all the pressure's on him to show up in the playoffs now. And he's getting help too, because CeeDee Lamb has been balling the hell out. Now, I get it. Not everything's been perfect here in Dallas, but he does have an alpha, number one, dare I say, elite wide receiver. I mean, CeeDee Lamb has been incredible. The separation's been top notch. What he provides after the catch, he goes and wins tough balls. There's nothing really left to say about CeeDee Lamb other than from the moment Dak Prescott re-arrived and he got starting caliber quarterback play, he's showed just how damn good he is. Now, like I said, it hasn't all been perfect for Dak Prescott, but that's the point of having a $40 million quarterback, right? Like, shouldn't have to have 3 great receivers and a perfect offensive line for him to play consistently great. That's just kind of my thing. But I will admit, Michael Gallup has not been Michael Gallup, and they made the decision to kind of pay him and Dalton Schultz over Amari Cooper, and Dalton Schultz going down as well. That was obviously, in hindsight, a pretty big mistake. You would rather just have Amari Cooper and, plug in, say, the Wisconsin rookie who continues to play great. But, Michael Gallup, he's been just a guy this year. He hasn't been making crazy catches. He's definitely not separating. He's been getting kind of bottled up. And I've been hesitant on lowering him because everyone recovers at their own rate, and he is coming off an ACL, and maybe next year he returns to glory. But he has not been a number 2 wide receiver. He's just been a dude out there. Now, they pick up T.Y. Hilton in the last few weeks, and that was a good move. He's been a good playmaker for them. nice kind of adjustment with the newfound information that Michael Gallup just isn't probably up to speed. Peyton Hendershot, role-playing tight end, had a really nice touchdown catch against the Jags. He's been getting into the lineup, doing some blocking, doing some dirty work, so he's going to get some love. And then, as I mentioned, Dalton Schultz is going to go down. Now, Schultz has played well. He's still a really good tight end, but just not quite living up to that really high 83 mark I had on him. He catches the franchise tag. I would not be the least bit surprised if they ultimately let him go. He's still blocking his ass off as well. Again, a good player, but as far as his efficiency and coming down with tough catches and being a separator and a real high-end tight end, it hasn't really been that. Some of these linemen are playing well for Dallas as they've really been sorting through they just can't seem to put the same lineup out there every week. I don't really understand what they did with Tyler Smith at left guard. I think they wanted to just see how he could hold up there. Thinking maybe Jason Peters is better at tackle. I don't know. We'll see what they trot out there against the Bucs this weekend. But Tyler Smith has definitely been better at tackle than he's been at guard. And he's just been very inconsistent. He's had some down games at tackle. He's had some elite games at tackle. I mean, what he did against the Eagles was one of the more dominant tackle performances of the entire season. Lockdown and paving ways in the run game. So this is their first round pick. I think it's kind of cool that they have moved Tyron Smith to right tackle to kind of give Tyler Smith that passing of the guard, or passing of the torch, changing of the guard type of deal at left tackle. And he's been very solid. Solid might not be the right word. He's been very streaky. Some great, some bad, but going to get some love here. And then Connor McGovern as well continues to climb. He's been a rock at left guard. Again, why I don't really understand why they mixed that up in Week 18. Look, man, I would just go Tyler Smith at left tackle, maybe Jason Peters at left tackle because he's played well at left. Whatever you feel most comfortable for the playoffs, do that. So between Tyler Smith and Jason Peters, whoever you think your better left tackle is, play McGovern at guard. You got center and right guard figured out, and then play Tyron Smith at right tackle. I don't think it's that complicated. We'll see what McCarthy and that group decide to do. But yeah, an interesting, really couple of months for the Cowboys. Some guys stepping up, some guys not stepping up. It's definitely led to some inconsistencies with this offense, which we've seen. You know, some halves they're terrible, some halves they're great. Then defensively, kind of the same deal, except for it's like, you know, their front continues to dominate and their secondary is really struggling. Now, Deron Bland's been a godsend here, but I mean, let's just talk about those cornerbacks at the bottom there. Kelvin Joseph, second round pick last year, a high second round pick, a top 50 pick, has been horrible. And you look at those two injuries there, they lose Jordan Lewis, and then Anthony Brown's been unavailable. They were really hoping Kelvin Joseph would make the most of that opportunity. They have not really been in a rush to play him, and my God, he has been horrible. Gets obliterated by the Jags, embarrasses himself, losing on a double move. He's been benched, and he's just not an answer for them right now. And Trayvon Diggs needs to take some ownership on this as well. I'm not saying he isn't, but like he deserves some blame. He has not played great in the second half of the season. First half of the year, it was looking like he had improved some of his coverage tendencies and wasn't getting beat as much, but that has fully regressed back to the guy we saw last year, where he is giving up some of the highest yardage totals in the league. He's just not a shutdown cover corner. The problem is you're not seeing him make those high number of interceptions to counteract that. So he's been an issue for them as well. So, you know, the Bucs are going to be going at these guys, and we'll see how they handle it this weekend. But up front, things are still hanging in there pretty good. I will say Neville Gallimore is going to go down. He's just useless, man. The third-round pick out of Oklahoma. He's a good athlete, but just gets moved against the run. Absolutely no pass rush productivity. There's been absolutely no development from him. Someone they were probably hoping would take a step up this year. But they have counteracted that fairly, I can't even say fairly nicely because it's such an issue for them, that interior defensive line. But at least they found something here in moving Chauncey Golston inside. They have such a deep edge group, probably the deepest in the league. So they took Chauncey Golston, who was like sixth on the edge depth chart, who's already a little bit oversized, not a great athlete, and had him gain weight and play defensive tackle. And that's been a transition for him. He struggled early on. But if you look at the last 3 weeks, he's kind of stood out, honestly. He really earned himself a lot more playing time in that Philly game where he only had 9 snaps, 7 of them as a rush defensive tackle, and some dominant pass rush wins against a good Philadelphia offensive line. The next couple weeks, he almost triples his snap count on a per game basis and out there making some plays. Had another good pressure against Tennessee. And then, my God, against Washington, you couldn't turn on that game without noticing him. He ends up with 6 defensive stops in that game. So showing some good run defensibility. So maybe there's something there with Chauncey Golston. I always said from him coming out of Iowa, and he was a 3rd-round pick, by the way, that he's going to have a really nice career as a third edge, a good run defender, a reliable player. But you take a guy like that, you have him put on 20 pounds, and you got to remember, or at least this makes you think of a former defensive tackle for them, Tyron Crawford, who was kind of a similar guy who flirted between edge and defensive tackle. I think they see a lot of that player in Chauncey Golston. So we'll keep an eye on that as we get into the playoffs and then, of course, into next season. And then off the edge, Sam Williams just continues to do his thing, not getting a whole lot of snaps. You're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20 a game, but he's good for a couple pressures. He's actually defended the run a little bit more lately. They've asked a little bit more from him in that role. So he is definitely impressed. I was not sold on Sam Williams coming out. I thought they reached on him, and I think there is a ton of potential there for him to long-term overtake DeMarcus Lawrence. And then Micah Parsons, I don't even feel like I need to talk about him, but he's going up too. I mean, he's unbelievable. I ranked him number 1 in my edge power rankings, even if I would probably give the Defensive Player of the Year vote to Bosa. Parsons, any normal year, would absolutely be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate himself. And then we're going to wrap this up with a draft crush of mine, Damone Clark. And it probably wasn't made as clear how much I liked Damone Clark because in the pre-draft process, he was supposed to have this season-ending injury and was going to miss his rookie season. Well, so much for that. He's been playing full-time snaps since week 9, and he's been awesome. So just to rewind a little bit, all the way back to my linebackers video, I had nearly identical grades on Quay Walker and Damone Clark. Size, athleticism, run defense, coverage. I actually preferred Damone Clark's coverage ability. Like, the fact that Damone Clark was, a 6th-round pick and Quay Walker was the 22nd pick in the draft, it is, I cannot possibly explain it other than, obviously, this injury situation, but that was very clearly blown out of proportion. So you'll see these guys ranked pretty closely now. We had Quay Walker moving up to a 71, Damone Clark, just a great draft pick for the Dallas Cowboys. They love their linebackers here, and they found another one. And then we've got our NFC 1 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll circle back to the star of the month, Hassan Reddick there, but let's start with the offense. Jalen Hurts really just keeping things rolling, and one thing I really respect about him is he comes out and has probably his worst quarter and a half of football against the Bears, but just his ability to respond so quickly, I think that's going to bode well for him in the future. It just shows the confidence and comfort that he's playing with. He's just playing virtually mistake-free football. He's been accurate. There's so many good things to say about Jalen Hurts, and was a legitimate MVP candidate before he goes down and misses a few games. So I'm excited to see him in playoff football to kind of redeem himself from last year because he's grown so unbelievably much. And he's it literally looks like a different quarterback than the one we watched against the Bucs last year. Then Devonta Smith's going to go up. He's incredible. Another player, it's like, what else do you want to say about him? He's the Slim Reaper. He'd be a number 1 wide receiver on half the teams in the league, and he's their number 2. So he's insane. Some of the catches he's made this year are just he probably has 3 of the 10 best catches any receiver has made this year, and that might be selling it short. Not to mention his ability to separate and all of the stuff he does. So he's just insane. His play speaks for itself. And then Grant Calcaterra had to step in with that injury to Goddard a little bit, and nothing crazy here, but made a couple catches, blocked okay. Going to get a little respect there. He's a rookie out of SMU. And then we got to shout out just this entire offensive line. I don't know if anybody, or if a lot of people, I should say, truly realize how incredible this O-line is. It's just rare to see all 5 starters make it through the season for the most part. I mean, there's been a game missed here or there. Lane Johnson missed a couple. But for a unit to be together like this and to have just a bunch of dudes playing at a Pro Bowl level, it's freaking special. And they're all like balanced. They're all good pass protectors and run blockers. It's just insane. There's no weak link on this entire offense. But Lane Johnson, so much credit to him. I mean, there was talk about him retiring, potentially trading him, with mental health issues. He's bounced back and had the best season of his career, voted first team All-Pro by the players this week. Then you got Landon Dickerson at left guard. He was a first-round caliber prospect that they sneak in the second round. He's been rapidly developing, I suppose, or plug and play as he was coming out of Alabama. He's been a mauler in the run game. He's had a couple hiccups in pass protection against some of those really good interior rushers that he has to face in this division. Guys like Jonathan Allen, even though we just shit-talked him, the guys New York has, but for the most part, he's been awesome all year long. And then Isaac Seumalo, I literally am speechless with how many things have gone well for the Eagles this year. We got Brandon Graham coming up as well. Between Seumalo and Brandon Graham, these guys were kind of like whatever you get from them is house money. Seumalo has not been able to make it through a season healthy. It's just been like the staple on him. And he's been a good player when he's played, but he hasn't been like a Pro Bowl caliber guard. Well, this year, not only did he manage to stay healthy for the entire season, played all 17 games, but he elevates to having the best season of his career. He's been a lockdown pass protector. He's been really good at moving people up front. It's insane. He's a former third-round pick. Like, this is not some random guy that carved out a job for himself. No, like, he's got the traits. He's a very good guard. And just kind of flies under the radar because he's one of their worst starters on offense, and he's a Pro Bowl caliber fucking guard. It's insanity. Jason, and this is why Hurts was not my pick for MVP, by the way. And then Jason Kelce, oh yeah, he's also having like the best year of his career. He's made it through the whole season, flirted with retirement. Nope, he's in there, all pro, kicking guys' ass in the run game, having one of his better years in pass protection. It's just this offense has a wow factor. It's wild. But let's talk about the defense as well. It hasn't been all rainbows and butterflies for the defense, but a lot of good here. There's not even a single player going down here. The only guy I even thought about was Robert Quinn, and he's kind of an afterthought here. But the star of the month is going to be Hassan Reddick, and I've been blown away by his wins as a pass rusher. And it's just a reminder to stay fluid with your opinions. Anything can always change. I was pretty convicted in saying for the last 2 years, going back to his breakout year in Arizona and then in Carolina, that, you know, his pass rush success, his sack totals really were fluky, and that he became unblocked a lot and quarterbacks would roll into him, and the amount of sacks that he produced did not equate to his one-on-one pass rush win rate. It did not equate to his pressure rate. Well, Philadelphia brings him in here, and I wouldn't even say it's really they're like scheming him up a whole lot. The Eagles they run the least amount of stunts in the entire league, right? And that's always been Hassan Reddick, is he's like a stunt man. No, they're just letting him line up one-on-one, and he's kicking dude's ass. His pass rush win rate has gone up by about 10%, which is astronomical if you're unfamiliar with that number. And definitely check out my positional power rankings video where we talked about these edge rushers. Hassan Reddick went 5 straight games with a freaking sack. So he's been awesome. He's awesome, sells it short. But a lot of these other guys up front are having great seasons as well. So Milton Williams, really just an afterthought with this group, but in the last month of football has been eye-opening as a run defender, which is not what you think of when you think of Milton Williams. He's a converted college edge player, an undersized defensive tackle. but he's been shooting gaps, blowing stuff up in the backfield. The pass rush stuff hasn't fully come along with him yet. I still think that's something that could happen, but they've needed help on that defensive line with run defense, right? They bring in Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph, and ever since then, Milton Williams has actually kind of turned a corner with his ability to disrupt things up front. So he's definitely a favorite of mine. It's good to see him succeeding. Brandon Graham, like, if you're not an Eagles fan, you've just got to be jealous of everything that's going on here. He's 34 years old. He hasn't been able to get through a season in 2 years. He's known for never being able to get a 10-sack season. So, like, everything is pointing towards, okay, Brandon Graham is, anything you get from him is house money. Maybe you can keep him healthy for the playoffs, use him on, like, 3 to 5 snaps a game. I suggested that they might cut him. Like, that's where we were at with Brandon Graham. And he's dominating snap in, snap out, game in, game out. He's back to being that premium pass rusher that he was in that Super Bowl run that they had. I love Brandon Graham. I've been a huge proponent of his game, but I did not see anything close to this coming from him. And everything has gone well for this Eagles roster and their production. Josh Sweat as well. He's taken a next step. You know, his pass rush ability is very good. It's been good. Nothing to really add on that front. Just more consistency is good to see, I suppose. But he's definitely taken a step up as far as his play strength and his gap discipline against the run. So that's been good to see. I hope that he is good to go for the playoffs, because I know he got knocked out of, I think it was the Bears game, right? With a concussion situation. So hopefully he's good to go. Then you got these linebackers. They're playing great. I've raved about TJ Edwards for a couple of years now, and he's just honestly one of the smartest linebackers in the league. I do believe that, because you don't survive with, 4.7, somewhere between 4.7 and 4.8 speed in the modern NFL if you're not a step ahead of the game. And he very clearly is. Like, you will occasionally see him unable to keep pace when he runs into a bad mismatch on like a crossing route. But for the most part, he's in great positioning coverage. He gets depth at an appropriate time. He can break down runs with the best of them. He is big and strong, so like he's a very good run defender, and he has carved out a really nice career for an undrafted linebacker out of Wisconsin. And then Kaiser White's kind of the counterpart there, and they brought him in to be a compliment to TJ Edwards as a coverage player. And for the first really half of the season, that wasn't necessarily working, but he has totally come on in the last 6 weeks. He's up to 6 pass breakups on the season. That's tied for second in the league. Oh, and by the way, TJ Edwards has the most. So there you go. But yeah, these linebackers are really playing well at the right time. And then into the secondary, I will say that Bradbury and Darius Slay haven't been quite as dominant as they were in the first half of the season. I didn't really feel like it was appropriate to lower them. Maybe should make notes on both of them. Just they're both getting beat at a higher rate than they were earlier in the year. So I guess something to keep an eye on into the playoffs. Avonte Maddox has been hurt. So it's not all rainbows and butterflies for the Eagles. And then they've had some safety issues as well. Well, not issues, but injuries. Like they've had to rotate some of these guys around. But everyone's pretty much stepped up. So Kayvon Wallace had to play a couple starts in there due to injury. And the thing with him coming out of Clemson, I liked him as a decent mid-round pick. The thing with him is always he took really bad angles and missed a ton of tackles at Clemson. Well, in 2 starts, and he's rotated into some packages. He's played about 190 snaps defensively. He's got 19 tackles, hasn't missed a single tackle. So, like, he's improved that weakness to his game. I think he has starter upside, so there could be further opportunities for him in the future. So I'm going to keep an eye on for sure. But Reed Blankenship had other ideas. I mean, he comes in undrafted out of Middle Tennessee State, just Howie Roseman doing his thing, finding a starting caliber safety and freaking out of Middle Tennessee State. But yeah, he comes in, gets the pick on Aaron Rodgers right out the gate. The last Studs and Duds episode, we created him and talked about that, but ended up getting about 4 more starts after that, rotating a little bit, and just very solid. Very impressed by what he's been able to do. Hasn't quite had that big splash play again to stand out, but another guy that should be in the mix for that safety room next year. And now the New York Giants, the star of the month. A tough decision, honestly, between Isaiah Hodgins and Dexter Lawrence. But I'm going to go with Hodgins because I think his ascension was a much-needed necessity for this team's really ability to finish the year strong. They needed someone else that could be a reliable target other than, Darius Slayton being a deep threat. Because let's face it, Darius Slayton isn't exactly reliable in those have-to-have-it situations. And I think Isaiah Hodgins has been an integral part of their ability to keep the chains alive, or to rather keep drives alive and move the chains. Loved Hodgins coming out of Oregon State. If you want to go back and listen to my Guys videos of him from, would that have been, I think, the 2020 draft. And obviously he follows Dable and Joe Shane over from Buffalo, and just so good to see him finally get an opportunity because he never showed that he couldn't play, right? He just wasn't getting those chances. I said coming out of Oregon State that he had the best pair of hands in that draft, even made some shallow Adam Thielen comparisons with how good his ball skills are. So he's never going to be a number one wide receiver, some elite guy. I think he potentially could ascend to being a number two if they get a really good number one and then keep Darius Slayton as the deep threat. That could be something to keep an eye out for. But if nothing else, he's a good wide receiver that they've needed to step up. So he's going to be our star of the month. We'll circle back to Dexter Lawrence, who could have shared the honors. But the rest of this offense playing relatively well as well. And Daniel Jones has been a big part of that. The last month of football, the most impressive stretch of football that Daniel Jones has ever played. You're seeing what confidence and play calling and having a belief in a quarterback can do for a young man. And you're starting to see some of those traits really shine through to the point where, he's dropping dimes down the field. He's still using his feet really well. Where, does this continue to grow? And is Daniel Jones quietly a quarterback that we discuss with, Jalen Hurts last year or Justin Fields this year, where, if you give him a legit surrounding core, does he show to be more than we've kind of projected him to be? And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think eventually you're going to want to move on from Daniel Jones, most likely, but they're also in a spot where I think you bring Jones back, whether that's on a contract extension or the franchise tag, and see where it goes from there. I mean, they're in a very good position right now, I would say, with just the staff and the culture right now. Gary Brightwell is running hard. Going to give him a little respect. I don't think there's a whole lot there other than a short yardage contributor and a rotational back, but he's getting some boosts to reflect some nice running there. And then Richie James, another wide receiver that has quietly stepped up. I mean, everyone's talking about Isaiah Hodgins, but Richie James is playing his best football. Richie, going back to, San Francisco, made some plays and was really in the mix in a talented group of weaponry there. And he just was never consistent enough, whether it was fumbles or drops. And certainly some of that has showed up in inconvenient times for the Giants. But overall, his hands have been way more reliable. And he's separating. He's been this team's Isaiah McKenzie. It's exactly why I said they took Robinson, the Kentucky kid, a little bit too early. Not that he played poorly or anything, but it's a very schemed up role, right? You see it with McKenzie. You see it with Richie James here. We talked about Khalif Raymond in Detroit. Just kind of that gadget receiver that you can move around, rely on the play calling to get a guy like this open. And as long as his hands don't suck, he can lean into the quickness and acceleration that he has to separate in the short to intermediate. So they got two of them now. They got Richie James. They've got, I don't know why I can't think of Robinson's first name out of Kentucky, but James doing a good job there. And then Daniel Bellinger just kind of steadily showing that he can play as a young tight end. Nothing crazy, but a few catches here, a few catches there, continuing to block pretty well. He's a nice young tight end. And then they bring in Lawrence Cager, who, there's a couple of fun fact notes for those that care on this list right here with Lawrence Cager, and then I'll tell a little story about Julian Love later. But Lawrence Cager was actually the very first note that I made in my cell phone when I decided that I wanted to start getting into scouting. So it would have been way back in like 2016, I think. I was at the airport watching a Georgia football, or Tennessee, Georgia. I think he was at Georgia. And he would have been like a freshman or a sophomore. He was not really on anybody's radar. But I was like, I made a note in my phone. I was like, Lawrence Cager, awesome contested catch, number whatever for Georgia or Tennessee, whichever school it was. Super, super random. But it was just like a cool moment that happened with me. I'd had a couple beers and I watched it and something popped about Lawrence Cager. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to start evaluating college players and get into the draft. So like Lawrence Cager changed my life, people. But anyway, he gets in week 18 off the Jets practice squad, I think. Just pops across the facility there and ends up with like a 7-catch game for the Giants, just showing that he can be maybe a player on this roster next year. I don't know. Anyway, Evan Neal has definitely not had the impact rookie season. You know, for everything that's gone right for the Giants this season, surprisingly, Evan Neal stepping in and being like a Pro Bowl caliber tackle right away has not been one of those things. They've actually had to kind of overcome his inability to protect from the right side of the line there. And even as a run blocker, he's let some guys get off of him and hasn't been as great there. So this does remind me a lot of a young Andrew Thomas who came out and just wasn't it right away. But now Andrew Thomas, one of the best left tackles in all of football. So certainly not giving up on Evan Neal. I think he's incredibly talented. And a reminder that not every offensive lineman steps into the league and kicks everybody's ass right away. Sometimes it just takes time. So hopefully that's the case with Evan Neal. I think it will be. But let's talk about the defense. Dexter Lawrence, as I mentioned, could have shared Star of the Month honors there with Isaiah Hodgins. I'm blown away by Dexter Lawrence. And I mentioned in the Giants deep dive that he could be a breakout candidate. I didn't really see him becoming a defensive player of the year candidate. And, candidate's a strong word. He never had a realistic, ability to win that award with the 3 edge rushers doing what they're doing. But honestly, Lawrence has been one of the 5 best defensive players in football this year. I do believe that, and should be on anyone's list of candidates for the award. And it's the two-way ability that he's shown. Coming out of the draft, coming out of Clemson, I loved his run defense, but I never thought that he would be a frickin' top 3 interior defensive lineman in terms of pass rush ability. And his athleticism is unbelievable. I mean, everything we talked about, the steps we hoped Vita Vea would one day take, Dexter Lawrence is that player and has taken those steps because he's really quick off the ball, enough that you see him perform swim moves and different quickness-based pass rush moves that allow him to shoot gaps and get through quickly. But he also is 340 plus pounds. He has power. That much can't be denied. And then he's right there with DJ Reader for the best run defending nose tackles in the league. The Giants would not be where they're at without Dexter Lawrence. He allows them to do everything that they want to do schematically up front. And he's going up into the 90s now. And then onto the edge group. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to keep going up here. Just continues to impress. He had just come off that big dominant performance against the Dallas Cowboys when we did our last episode. But in this section, he's got that dominant night that helped the Giants secure a victory over the Washington Commanders that ended up being a huge reason they were able to get into the playoffs. So Thibodeau, a big fear factor, impact pass rusher right out the gate there. And then I do want to talk a little bit about Azeez Ojulari. He's playing well. I like Azeez Ojulari. I think a lot of Giants fans, though, are expecting him to get a boost here in this episode because from weeks 13 through 16, he ended up with 5 sacks in just those 4 games. Sacks can be a very fraudulent number. He's got 6 sacks on the season on 19 pressures. So this is a conversation we can have again another day, but it is what it is. If you walk into sacks or if a high percent of your pressures are getting converted into sacks, those numbers can be faulty. So I'm not trying to dog Azeez holy crap. Let's try that again. I'm not trying to dog Azeez Ojulari. I think he's a good player. I've got him rated as a 76, and I'm excited to see this defense really potentially getting together healthy for the first time this year, potentially here against the Vikings, especially up front. as it looks like Leonard Williams, who's been out of the lineup for a while now, should be back in the mix. Azeez Ojulari should be good to go. And then even in the back end, Adoree Jackson might be able to sneak back in there healthy. They just got Xavier McKinney back healthy. So all of a sudden, this defense that was overachieving earlier in the year, like, I think it's more of a legit, potentially great defense at this point with how what we now know about Dexter Lawrence and getting some of these guys back into the mix, which is really exciting and potentially very dangerous for the Minnesota Vikings. And then at linebacker, Jalen Smith's going to go up one. He's been a solid run defender, not a good coverage player. He can't really run anymore, but he's doing everything he can for this team to play physical and consistent as a tackler. And then I do want to shout out Jarrad Davis as well. They picked him up off of the Lions practice squad, or he was released by Detroit, either way, and gets a start week 18 and look pretty good. You know, Jarrad Davis is a more experienced version of what they have right now in Micah McFadden, where his best trait is blitzing, and this team loves to blitz. It's not a particularly difficult role where he's basically either blitzing, spying, which won't really be the case against Kirk Cousins, or running man coverage. So it's not like it's a difficult defense for him to come in and pick up. So do they start Jarrad Davis against the Vikings instead of Micah McFadden? We'll see. Into the secondary, Nick McLeod is going to go up with a lot of hesitation. I mean, he was down there at a 60, right? Like, he's actually had some good games lately. He was good against the Vikings, good against the Colts. Before that, though, he looked like a practice squad addition that had no business being on a football field. But really, ever since the dropped interception against Washington, which was, I think, his low point on the season, they've continued to give him reps, and he's played well since then. So he's going to get a little bit of respect. He is a 6'1" corner out of Notre Dame, like, has some traits. I'm not saying he's ever going to be a starter or anything, but maybe a decent backup if he's turned a corner as far as his confidence. And then Cordell Flott, the third-round pick out of LSU, he's had to play quite a bit. He hasn't really been a full-time starter for the majority of the time here, just kind of rotating in and around the lineup. But in the last 3 weeks, he gets 41 snaps against the Vikings, actually his best game of his young career there. Had a nice pass breakup in that game. And then got the full-time start in this Week 18 game against Philadelphia, and he held his own. So there might be something there in Cordell Flott. He was a third-round pick, really young kid. He just turned 21 during the season here for the Giants. So, interesting player. He played slot at LSU. Still, in a lot of ways, learning how to play the game. So we'll see what he can do into the playoffs, but I view him as a potential starter next year based on what he's shown. And then Julian Love just continues to be a really stable safety. He's not some crazy playmaker or super instinctive safety. In fact, there was a play against the Eagles where he kind of botched his leverage. I thought he was in position to intercept Jalen Hurts, kind of undercut the ball, and A.J. Brown ended up with one of his big catches in that game. But overall, he's been a balanced safety. He's not giving up too much in coverage, and he's been a really reliable tackler. I said I had a funny story on Julian Love as well, like I did Lawrence Cager early in my YouTube career. Julian Love was actually my computer background for like a whole year. There's a sick picture of him at Notre Dame that I had posterized and turned it into a background as a bit of a Photoshop learning experience. And it's just a random ass player that was my only player I've had as a background like in my life. But anyway, Landon Collins as well has been brought into the mix on this team, as well as I noticed in week 18 that Jefferson, the old Wink Martindale favorite, I can't think of his name. Oh God, it's going to drive me crazy. Tony Jefferson has been playing for them, and he's been okay. So they're kind of rotating Tony Jefferson and Landon Collins. I think Collins has played a little bit better, but they got just a freaking motley crew of dudes on this defense that are kind of stepping up in this scheme. So Giants are fun. I'm picking them to beat the Vikes this weekend. Let's see how it goes. Third and final interlude, I just want to remind you guys that the official store of That Franchise Guy is open for business. You can shop TFG merch. You can rep the brand. You can support the brand. We've got the Kyler Murray Size Matters Not brand up there right now. and lots more coming. So head over to thatfranchisestore.com and check it out. Next, we head to the NFC South with the champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The star of the month was tough here. They've had some good football and some bad football in this stretch. I will say they're getting hot and healthy at the right time. But Sean Murphy-Bunting, to me, is going to be the star of the month loosely here. He's been injured most of the season, but playing not just to help this defense return to championship form, but for a contract extension for himself. He's been a lockdown corner, whether he's playing in the slot, playing outside. He's such a physically talented player. Seems to be putting things together at the right time here. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. Obviously, they've had their down moments, and for a big part of this stretch here, week 13 through 18, Tom Brady was playing some of the worst football we've seen him play in a decade. Like the Bengals game, the Niners game, even against a measly Cardinals defense on Monday Night Football. He just was pressing too much. Granted, some of his linemen were out, and he just was probably dealing with a lot of frustrations at that point in time. Just couldn't get on the same page with these wide receivers. But with that, and just looking back on the full scope of his season, he just hasn't been that elite quarterback this year. Now, he did finish strong, right? That Panthers game, he returned to form. And we know Tom Brady is more than capable of just turning it on and playing like an elite quarterback in the playoffs. So I'm not going to rule that out happening. I'm probably manifesting that happening here moving forward now that I'm lowering him. But I don't think anyone's really going to argue that Tom Brady has not been as good as he's been the last couple of years in Tampa Bay. And then let's get Donovan Smith out of the way. I think he's also contributed to some struggles here in Tampa. Another guy that just hasn't been as good in this year as he's been in the Tampa Bay era. Not only is he losing more matchups, but he has committed an astronomical amount of penalties, and they've always come at the worst moments. It feels like throughout the season, the second Tom Brady finally connected with Mike Evans, that one's called back for a holding on Donovan Smith. He's also not moving people up front in the run game. We know how much this run game has struggled, and he's been a part of that. So he's going to come down one here. He still can play. He's not horrible, but he's had some rough moments this season, to say the least. But really, the rest of the linemen, I think, have stepped it up in the last month. Tristan Wirfs comes back from the injury and resumes his dominance. He's been rising all year to the point where if you wanted to make a case that Tristan Wirfs is the best tackle in the NFL, you got a pretty strong case, honestly. Then you've got Nick Leverett has stepped in at left guard because Luke Goddard, their second-round rookie, was so bad. They needed anybody, just somebody, please, be able to hold their own in pass protection at left guard. And this Nick Leverett has been able to do that, which is just admirable. I thought about making him the star of the month for the second month in a row, just to find somebody that isn't a turnstile at left guard has been nice for this offense. Now, one note is, so Luke Goddard was actually right tackle at Central Michigan, and in Week 18, they were resting Tristan Wirfs and played Luke Goddard at right tackle, and granted against a miserable Falcons pass rush, maybe the worst in the league, but Goddard looked much more comfortable and held his own. So just something to keep an eye on as, do they see that as an out for Donovan Smith long-term, potentially? I don't know. They did spend a second-round pick on him. He was a pretty good player coming out of Central Michigan. And then the center, Robert Hainsey, this is also going to be fascinating. I mean, just to begin with, he's played great. He's been a total rock in pass protection at center. He has handled the basically opportunity quite well with Jensen going down, and I'm very curious to see what they do now, because Jensen potentially is going to be playing this weekend after we thought he was going to be done for the year. So what do they do at left guard? Do they go with Nick Leverett? Do they move Hainsey over? Do they just play Jensen at left guard? Going to be fascinating what the coaching staff decides to do there. I also got to shout out Russell Gage. He's been being lowered throughout the season, and over the last month, he's been able to get on the same page finally with Tom Brady and has become a much bigger part of this offense, which, they paid him decent money to do that, so it's good to see him finally playing up to that pay grade. And then onto the defensive side of the ball, Joe Tryon starting to get after the quarterback at a much higher rate. First-round pick last season. Is something clicking for him at the right time? It's the stats would back that up. He ended up with a nice 40 pressure season, an example of the sack numbers going the other way. You get 40 pressures, you expect little more than 5 sacks on the season. So Tryon playing well late here. And then D. Delaney, slot corner, has stepped in just different spots here. I think he had 1 start, and he's been used in a rotation in a couple different games. And he's held his own at slot corner. 27-year-old out of Miami. Not sure there's much there, but good to have some nice depth there, if nothing else. And then we have the Atlanta Falcons, and my goodness, can this team run the ball right now? They have plenty of issues at hand, but between the offensive line and Tyler Algier, who's going to be our star of the month, they have something working there. And Arthur Smith and that outside zone run-heavy offense is happy about this. And Algier is going to go all the way up to an 80 to wrap up his rookie season. And you might think that's high for a second. He did just clear 1,000 yards on the season, believe it or not. Really came on hard and fast late. But there's just no real... I mean, he doesn't have long speed, but what's really not to like about Tyler Algier? He's shown vision, he's shown acceleration, he's shown incredible toughness to break tackles, fight for tough yardage, convert in those situations. He, to me, is gonna repeat next year as a 1,000-yard rusher as long as he stays healthy. He's just so reliable. He doesn't fumble. He's doing everything he did at BYU. He's just a workhorse, man. So many parallels between him and Jamal Williams, both BYU backs. Kind of feel like the same guy right now. Marcus Mariota is going to come down, however. We raised him in the last episodes of Studs and Duds, and he just followed it up with some stinkers and got benched. I mean, there's not really a whole lot else to say about that. He, like Carson Wentz, will be a bridge quarterback option for somebody out there. Although I say that, but I think Mariota may have actually signed a 2-year deal here, so he might be back as the backup. And that opened the door for Desmond Ridder to get some starts here. And early on, he really looked lost in his first 2 starts and just didn't look ready. Kind of looked like Arthur Smith, in a way, knew what he was doing by playing Mariota over Desmond Ridder. But very quickly, by his 3rd start, certainly his 4th start, I think did look a lot more comfortable just running the rhythm of the offense. They didn't ask a whole lot of him, but made some big throws and opened up an opportunity for Drake London to play much better down the stretch. So really good to see that those 2 guys are going to work well together. And I guess we'll just wait and see this offseason what they want to do at quarterback, because I think Ridder, you could go into next year with him as your quarterback. I think there's worse things they could do, but that's a conversation for another day. He was fine. And then Drake London is going to go up a bunch. Credit where credit's due. I'm not the biggest believer in Drake London to become the next Mike Evans. Still a long way to go until we can have that conversation, but the way he played in the final 4 weeks of the season was just a much more explosive receiver than what we saw for the first 14 weeks of the year. And a lot of Falcons fans will be like, what are you talking about? He still produced and was, right up there with all these rookie wide receivers and graded out great and all that stuff. Well, really, up until Desmond Ridder came in, I thought Drake London was doing all of the stuff that I figured he would be good at in the NFL. Kind of the quick release, a lot of short to intermediate targets, reliable hands, but not necessarily getting down the field, consistently mossing dudes and being like a dominant sort of number 1-esque wide receiver. And towards the second or towards this last month of the year, he started to play much more like that. So big expectations for him being drafted, the first wide receiver off the board in this class. But if he's playing like that, the Falcons are going to be more than happy with their decision. So Drake London going up +3 into the 80s now, up to an 81. And then Cole Pruitt filling in and playing great in the Kyle Pitts role. Pruitt's just always so underrated wherever he's been. Minnesota, Tennessee, Atlanta now. Perfect wing, role-playing tight end. He can separate with some speed in the short to intermediate game. He does enough as a blocker to stay out there and contribute to this run game. It's just surprising to me that he's never gotten like a significant contract. With all of these Shanahan offenses in the league, I would think someone would look at him and say, yeah, that's a player that can have a serious role in our offense. So he's carved that out here in Atlanta. I don't know if they bring him back with Kyle Pitts returning. but just showing again that he can play. And then the offensive line, 5 players going up, and even more than that standing out. They are seriously blocking so impressively well here in Atlanta. And Jake Matthews, let's start there. The veteran, 30-year-old franchise left tackle. He's had probably his best season, at least in a few years, and his pass protection's been very solid, and he's getting more and more comfortable in this new kind of wide zone offense, as are these 2 first-round picks from, the 2019 draft. Chris Lindstrom, let's start with him. He's a first-team All-Pro. He's been the best guard in the NFL this year. He's been absolutely unfreaking believable. And this is an ultra-athletic, top 15 pick, reaching his potential. One of several really nice breakouts in a way for the Falcons. Like, he's just a freaking monster. Watch his tape. It is a teach tape for how to reach block and block in these wide zone offenses, and he's been good in pass protection. Then you go to right tackle, where his first class partner, Caleb McGarry, out of Washington. I don't know when he turned into fucking Paul Bunyan, but this dude ate his Wheaties this year. He turned into one of the best run-blocking right tackles in the NFL, and it's not just because he has Chris Lindstrom next to him. Caleb McGarry looks he honestly is so reminiscent to me of Jesus, what's his name? McGlinchey in San Francisco. Just so athletic on the move and just so naturally attuned to leveraging these guys to turn them and flush them out of these wide zone blocks. But then when he's in space, he's had some really nice pancake blocks on the move too. So they've really got a nice kind of cornerstone group of tackle and guard and all that. And then they're just going to kind of have to figure out center and left guard. It should be pretty easy to fill these guys in now with those cornerstones at tackle and at right guard. So Elijah Wilkinson's been starting at left guard the most out of anybody on the Falcons this season, but he's dealt with, I guess, some injuries, or they've benched him. I'm not entirely clear what's going on there. I'm not quite as tuned in to his start-sit decisions, I suppose. But when he's been in there, he's been reliable as a pass protector. He's bounced around the league. Not the best athlete in the world for this system, but if he's your weak link, you could do worse. Drew Dahlman, of course, has been their center for this entire season, and he's been fine. He's been a good run blocker. Pass protection's been up and down. I was always a little bit surprised that they went with him, though, over Matt Hennessy, who's been their starting center the last couple of years, who honestly was a dominant run blocker last season, and it was just kind of weird that they didn't use him all year. Maybe he was hurt, and I'm unaware of that, but week 18 and a couple weeks leading up to that, they actually were putting Matt Hennessy in there at left guard, and he played pretty well. So do they look at Hennessy now as an option between that left guard and center position for next year? Could he be a potential breakout here? This is the best thing the Atlanta Falcons have going for them, is this combination of run blocking scheme and now running back in Tyler Algier. If they're going to carve out a path to win the NFC South next year that does not look like it's going to be all that good, that's going to be it right there. So definitely some positivity for the Falcons, who we've had some tough conversations about them maybe being in purgatory and where are they at. Well, they do have one dominant thing going for them. They might be the best running football team in the league right now. It reminds me a little bit of where Cleveland was at, although they don't have, a couple years ago, they don't have Nick Chubb in there. Over to the defense, not a whole lot to add. This unit sucks. They've got a lot of work to do on that side of the ball, and I think I saw Dean Pease finally hanging it up. What a career for him, the defensive coordinator. We'll see what they do schematically, but just a couple notes with some of these front seven guys. Arnold Ebiketie, I wanted to lower him, or I thought about lowering him. Not that I want to lower him. I love Arnold Ebiketie. Went to Twitter to find out, though, why was it that after week 12, all of a sudden his snap count was like cut in half, and he completely failed getting after the quarterback. Turns out he messed up his forearm in that week 12 game against the Commanders, and that's what was going on there. So if you want to take a little ammunition, if you're a Falcons fan debating where Arnold Ebiketie lied in this talented edge class, he had a good year. but unfortunately an injury that he was trying to play through really going to hurt his pass rush efficiency metrics when you look back on it, because he went the last 3 games without a single pressure. And I can imagine, especially knowing his play style where he loves chops and cross chops and rip moves, that having a messed up forearm hurt like hell and probably hurt his ability to win in the ways that he's used to. And then also the linebacker situation. I actually thought Michael Walker was playing all right this year. Not like great or anything, but they ended up benching him for Troy Anderson, who was a second-round pick, and he made some splash plays, but Troy Anderson has a long way to go himself. So I don't know what I really have to say about that, but it's just another note that I had. Anderson's been playing. I didn't feel like he played well enough to get a boost. And Michael Walker, even though he got benched for a young player, I didn't think he was playing bad enough to warrant lowering him here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then just a couple players in the secondary. Isaiah Oliver, he definitely dealt with a lot of injuries this year, but I'm fascinated with what they did with him in the last couple weeks. They actually played him in a little bit more of a safety hybrid role. He's been a slot corner for them, and they definitely played him quite a bit still as a slot corner. But, he got, I think, 12 snaps week 17 as a free safety, played a little bit more like in the box as that kind of strong safety, bandit linebacker type. He was a perimeter corner coming out of Colorado. He doesn't have great long speed, but he's quick, he's big. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like a really poor man's like Justin Simmons in a lot of different ways, as a guy in Simmons that's played a lot of slot corner way back in the day. So I'm just very fascinated in how he played. I think he's going to be a pending free agent, so I'm just curious, like, who targets him. I've had conversations in the past about similar to Justin Simmons, but in these quarters-heavy split safety defenses, converted corners play really well at safety. Guys like Simmons, Micah Hyde, the list is quite long there. So I would be curious if Isaiah Oliver got an opportunity somewhere in like Washington or Green Bay, somewhere that has one of these systems. I think he could maybe have a career resurgence. He was a highly drafted, I think, second, third round pick. Interesting player. And then Cornell Armstrong got some starts, played well week 18. He's a depth piece, but going to get a little love. Then the Carolina Panthers, after getting a wave of upgrades last week, or in the last episode rather, not so many this time around, but the star of the month is going to be Frankie Louvu, the do-it-all poster boy for the jack of all trades, master of none. Send him on a blitz, drop him into coverage, rush him off the edge, ask him to defend the run from middle linebacker, weak side linebacker. He can do it all. And just going to be a piece for them next year. He kind of filled into the Hassan Reddick role in this interesting defense. And yeah, there's not a whole lot else to say about him. I don't know how much better of a player from this he's going to get. Like, he's just not an amazing athlete. He's not the biggest guy, but very like Kyle Van Noy-esque Frankie Louvu. Then onto the offense. I do have a note on Sam Darnold. This was kind of a nice stretch of time to get the whole Sam Darnold experience. If we did this after just his first few starts, he would have gone up. But then we would have been inclined to lower him again, because the last couple weeks did not finish strong. Kind of what we all in the back of our minds expected. But hey, Darnold did step in and played well for the first couple weeks. I'm glad I didn't go all in on the Sam Darnold thing, but he definitely piqued my interest for a little bit. Panthers should definitely be looking for a different quarterback next year, in my opinion. This was kind of his last of last chances there, and it just didn't end with the consistency that you needed to see. Putting the ball in harm's way too many times these last couple weeks. That said, Chuba Hubbard is starting to look more and more like that guy that once upon a time was discussed as a potential first-round running back. Remember, he kind of questionably returned for his final season. I would just say, Blake Corum, be careful with that decision. It's not too late to back out. Because look at Chuba Hubbard. Fell into the third round, had to fight for opportunities, and even this year, they gave the job to Foreman first. But in time, Hubbard really impressed. Some really big games. Was awesome in that Seattle game, and they continue to give him a run here. And I think he's going to make a case to be their day one starter next year, and should be someone to keep an eye on as far as fantasy football is concerned, because he's a talented back. He's got great long speed, showed some good vision and ability to break tackles. Then Shi Smith was a high floor slot receiver coming out of South Carolina, and he's getting those opportunities to do that here for the Panthers. He's been reliable there in the short to intermediate game. Love to see that. And then as we flip over to the defensive side of the ball, Derek Brown continuing to reach his upside a little bit more. He's had an up and down start to his career, but this year, by far the best year of his career, both defending the run and as a pass rusher. He has doubled his pass rush production from last year. Now, people only see the 1 sack in there, but he has an impressive 40 pressures. And in the last two of the last 3 games against Detroit and New Orleans, some dominating reps, speeding up the timing of the quarterback, showing that get off and power that he has. Also, much better as a run stuffer this year. Sets a career high in defensive stops, and you can definitely feel his presence in the middle of this defense. So they spent a high pick on him, and he's starting to look like that guy that they invested in. Next to him, you've got Bravion Roy, nose tackle type out of Baylor. He's, hasn't done a whole lot, but he's come on a little bit as a run defender lately. I think he could get into the mix for that nose tackle rotation next year. And then as we get towards the back end of the defense here, Shaq Thompson, man, he was playing with his hair on fire this season, especially down the stretch after Matt Rule was fired. Something seems to have clicked for Shaq Thompson. He's always been a good linebacker, but a guy that was a converted safety coming out of Washington. He's never really been known for being this dominant run defender, but my God, just like I said, playing with his hair on fire, flying to the football, breaking down opposing run games, looking outstanding out there. So that's a new evolution in his game that I certainly didn't expect to see here as he approaches his age 29 season. But as we've discussed, linebacker learning curves can be different for everyone. And something definitely seems to have resonated with Shaq Thompson as far as his ability to break down and see the run game. And then J.C. Horn on the back end. We've been relatively quiet about pumping up J.C. Horn, but he did have a really good year. Unfortunately, does get hurt now for the second year in a row. And durability is something that followed him back to college. So I would just love to see him make it through a season where I think his tape was really impressive and could certainly get into the conversation for who some of the best corners in the NFL are. Big game against the Seattle Seahawks that was kind of a standout performance for him. I wouldn't say he's had a ton of those. He's been more of that kind of quiet shutdown type throughout the season. So perhaps a little bit late to the party as far as giving him his credit. But impressed with what J.C. Horn did, and hopefully he can stay healthy for the former number 8 overall pick in the draft. And then we wrap up the NFC South with the New Orleans Saints. And the star of the month is going to be wide receiver Rashid Shaheed out of Weber State. The Saints have dug themselves in a hole with their front office a little bit, but you have got to tip your cap to this scouting department for finding this guy. He has been killing it as a deep threat for the Saints, like week in, week out at this point. 2 huge games stand out to me, even though he has consistently been getting 3 or 4 catches a week now at this point. But the Falcons game, massive 68-yard completion. And then the Eagles game, he ends up with 6 catches for 78 yards, but one of them, he puts on a release and he just burns past Garrett Bradbury. Like, this dude can absolutely play. He can run routes. He can fly off the line of scrimmage. No drops this season. He's 6 foot, 180, so he's a little bit slender, but he's got real speed. He's not a complete twig, and he definitely has some height to him. So I'm just fascinated, man. Between him and Olave, it is not easy to cover these guys. Just adding, we all talked about how they needed receivers this year. We thought Michael Thomas, Jarvis, obviously Olave, but also, I don't even know what the heck happened to Justin Hardy. The dude changed his name and forgot how to play football, apparently. But Rashid Shaheed is filled right into a lot of those guys' roles, and he's freaking awesome. I can't wait to see if he can keep this thing going. One of the more explosive, high upside undrafted free agents I can remember, especially at a wide receiver position where not a lot of these guys slip through the cracks like that much. Usually if you can play, they'll find you and you're going day 2 or early day 3 at the latest. And then sticking on the offensive side of the ball, just Taysom Hill needs to be discussed here because this is being reflected by my Madden roster. The changes we're making to him aren't reflected by either quarterback or tight end. If we moved him to running back, it certainly would. But Taysom Hill has officially evolved from being just a gimmick and Sean Payton's pet project. He has evolved into being one of the most legitimately dangerous runners of the football in the NFL. There's only 3 running backs that have a better yards after contact than Taysom Hill. And obviously what they do with him is beneficial to him. I'm not saying they could just put him at running back and he'd be great, although I think they could. But his acceleration into the hole alone is different. He just gets 0 to 60 in the snap of a finger. But he's 220 pounds, which is about as big as any of the biggest backs in the league. And what stands out the most about him is that at 32 years old, a positionless player, he is playing like every snap is going to be his last. He runs with more urgency and effort than I would argue any runner of the football in the entire league. So he's getting some respect. If you want to know what's going up, it's the acceleration, the break tackle, the trucking, the awareness, the ball carrier vision, all that. He's, a tough guy when it comes to his Madden rating. What is he? But he's just a freaking football player, and he's really good at that sport. And the contract just makes this even more hilarious. The fake contract where he's supposedly making $40 million a year. He's just one of the most bizarre players, circumstances, stories in the entire league. But I love it, and I expect him to be back, and we'll see kind of what they do. Andy Dalton's not going to go up here. He's gotten a lot of respect throughout the year, but I could totally see a world where they just bring Dalton back, rotate these guys. They've established what a real 2-quarterback system in the NFL can look like, where one guy can help you stay ahead of the chains and push the ball downfield on third downs and take care of the football. And a running quarterback like Taysom Hill, where they have actually started to have him throw occasionally, by the way, whether it's play action or just running quick game with him. Because if you just do that once or twice a game, defenses can't completely stack the box. So there's been a lot of criticism about this coaching staff and all that, but I actually think it's commendable. The success they had offensively with this kind of motley crew of players is relatively impressive to me. And then speaking of motley crew of random weapons, Juwan Johnson as well, converted wide receiver who plays still a little bit of slot, but he puts his hand in the dirt and does what he can as a blocker. But his just kind of red zone prowess, he's got really good ball tracking ability. He's so big and thick that defenders can't really move him around when the ball's in the air. So he's good at attacking it. He's had some drops, yada, yada. He's not a perfect player. But 7 touchdowns on the year. He's another legitimate piece that they've done a good job finding a way to get him involved in the offense because he's just one of their better pass catchers. But then we're going to flip over to the defense. They've had some ups and downs throughout the season. I think you look everything they did with the linebackers and into the secondary late in the season, things were pretty good. But up front, definitely some disappointments. Cam Jordan has gone down consistently throughout the year, and I want to talk about Marcus Davenport going down here. Big year for Davenport this year coming into it. Contract year, a player that was a high first-round pick that this team traded an additional first-round pick to go get. They really wanted him to emerge as their number one rusher, and it just didn't happen. And when he was out there, he was fine. I would say he was slightly disappointing as far as his ability to get after the quarterback. But yet again here, showing that he just can't stay healthy. And down the stretch here, kind of turns into a pumpkin. They put him into a light rotation. He barely plays. He barely gets after the quarterback. I don't know what was going on. I could only imagine it was injuries there. But he's going to probably hit the market at this point. I don't think the Saints have the money for him, and I don't think they have the interest in paying him big money. So he is definitely a player that still can have brighter days ahead of him. I can certainly see him being an interesting free agent signing for someone. I would expect like the Chicago Bears or one of these teams with a lot of money and cap space to throw a significant amount of money at him. And he's just going to be kind of a polarizing free agent for sure. Because at his best, he's one of the more dominant bull rushers in the entire league. But how often can you get him at his best? I think that's a tough question to answer. But another guy on that D-line that has actually played really well this year is Carl Granderson. Now, not so much as a pass rusher. He's fine there. He's a high-effort guy, but he just doesn't have a lot of bend or pass rush moves. But Granderson, he's a big-bodied dude. They've occasionally played him as like a 3-4 defensive end in some of those odd packages. But he's just a freaking like high-intensity, big-bodied guy. Reminds me a little bit of like Shaq Lawson. And I like what he does. He's a good third edge piece to have as a run defender. And again, he's shown a couple flashes as a pass rusher. So if they had to make him a starter next year to kind of rotate with Peyton Turner, who played all right this year when he was healthy, I think they could do worse than that group along with Cam Jordan. We'll see what happens with him. But definitely not the glorified edge group that we looked at these guys coming into the year with Davenport and Cam Jordan. But into the second level, Caden Ellis, basically just copy and paste everything I said about Frankie Louvu, the jack of all trades, master of none linebacker. That's Caden Ellis. He plays him at Mike, weak side backer, off the edge. He ended up with 8 sacks on the season, defended the run really well, got in the way of a couple passing lanes. You know, he's showing he's an athletic dude. He's twitched up. He's got a really nice first step. Eventually, Demario Davis is going to slow down. It hasn't been this year, but Caden Ellis does have kind of a similar skill set. He's not quite as big, but he's definitely been what they hoped they were getting in Zach Bond. For those that remember the tweener linebacker out of Wisconsin, he hasn't worked out. Caden Ellis has, and at least for their base packages, he's definitely a weapon that they can load up and have him tee off with. And then into the secondary, Alontae Taylor, the second-round corner, has certainly had his ups and downs. He's had good games, but he's had great games too. He had a shutdown 3 pass breakup performance against the Atlanta Falcons, showing some high-end ability there. And a good game the week before that against Tampa as well. And, you know, he's a traitsy, lengthy, fast corner that's just kind of raw. And that rawness certainly showed up in certain games this year where he was a bit grabby or getting beat. But there's a lot to work with Alontae Taylor. It's why they drafted him in the top 50 of the draft. So keep an eye on him to be kind of a breakout next year for sure. And then Tyrann Mathieu just kind of quietly wrapped up a really good season this year. Honestly, I thought he was a little bit better than he was in Kansas City those last couple of years, and definitely got comfortable in this system as the year went on. And it was all wrapped up by a beautiful interception against Carolina in the final week of the season. So I just wanted to give him a little bit of love. I feel like I've been harder on Tyrann Mathieu, pushing back on the idea that he's a top 5 safety in the NFL. Well, he definitely played around that range this season. And we're on to the NFC West, our final division, approaching hour 5 of Studs and Duds this week. It's been a grind, so let's finish strong. Star of the month for the Arizona Cardinals, Josh Jones, the left tackle, 3rd-round pick last season, who really disappointed in his rookie year. Well, it turns out left tackle's his position, and we talked a little bit about this in the last installment of Studs and Duds, but he followed through. So the left tackle, DJ Humphries, goes down for the year, and then they don't miss a beat with Josh Jones. In fact, he was probably better as a pass protector on the left side of the line. I really don't think that's something they're going to want to mess around with. Jones is cheaper and younger, and you also have Kelvin Beachum playing some of his best football in his career, one of the more underrated pass-protecting tackles of the entire decade, just because nobody talks about this guy, and for the better part of 10 years, he's been a pretty good pass-protecting left tackle that's never really been compensated for how he's played, because he's such a weird body type, but he gets the job done. So what do they want to do? Is DJ Humphries someone they could move into guard? Could they get something for him? I don't know. It's going to be something to monitor as we approach a new offseason with a new staff. Congratulations, Cardinals fans, on that, by the way. But James Conner has impressed me as well. While this team had every reason to quit, honestly, they played some of their more physical football in the Cliff Kingsbury era, and I think James Conner's running was a part of that. He grinds it out, man. You know, that's his background, a cancer survivor. He got paid. I didn't fully agree with, bringing him back for that much, but he's playing up to that contract right now. So +1 for him. And then Trey McBride, 2nd-round pick here in Arizona. and very quickly was given the reins to the starting tight end job as soon as Zach Ertz got hurt. And for a little bit, it wasn't looking great. But over the last 5 weeks or so, Trey McBride really showing everything that made him mine and many people's tight end one in this draft class. Reliable hands, ability to be a mismatch problem in the short to intermediate game. Didn't block as well as I anticipated he might, but overall, impressed by Trey McBride and going to get the 2 rating points back that we took away from him in the last episode and an additional 1. Will Hernandez as well having a career year himself as a pass protector. Another interesting player. He comes into the league as a second-round pick, burst onto the scene with that Giants team right away, and then faded into oblivion as someone that really struggled to both pass protect and use that stocky short build that he has to generate push up front. And he's really responded well to getting released in New York, and a new team has, a new environment has been positive for him. So I think it was a 1-year deal. They brought him back on. No reason they shouldn't find an extension for him. And hell, even Billy Price has played okay at center. He's been up and down. He's just not a very good center. Was way overdrafted in the first round way back when by the Bengals, but he's bounced around. He started a bunch of games for the Giants last year, proved to be adequate, and he's even better this year for the Cardinals. Probably carving out a nice career incoming as a backup piece. And then we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Cameron Thomas and Myjai Sanders, a pair of third-round edge rushers, both kind of doing exactly what I figured they would. And Cameron Thomas even more impressive than I thought he would be. Just doing a little bit of everything, honestly. He's been impressive getting after the quarterback. He's had some nice wins, some nice sacks, and he's been defending the run particularly well as well. And then Myjai Sanders showing off that quickness and pass rush ability as well. I think he's back to playing at his comfortable weight, around 250 pounds after a weird pre-draft combine situation. They're both good players. I don't know if either of them will prove to be like true starters. That's kind of what I said when they drafted them. I just didn't see a ton of upside there. But if nothing else, they're good role players and nice players to have on the team. And then at linebacker, Ben Neiman having a career resurgence here in Arizona. He's kind of had to fight for this opportunity. Of course, you had Isaiah Simmons, who I want to talk about in a minute, and Zaven Collins were the day one starters for this team at linebacker. But as the years gone on, Ben Neiman has really earned the LB2 job. He's been the better run defender, the best run defender that they've had at linebacker. He's been a remarkably secure tackler. He's only missed 1 tackle on the season, which is really crazy, with 67 total tackles on the year and 195 run defense snaps. So this is a guy that played 1 million games in Kansas City. Eventually, his athletic shortcomings led to them moving on in Kansas City, but clearly knows the game and is playing with a high level of confidence right now. We'll see what they end up doing with him, as he was a free agent pickup. But I want to talk about Isaiah Simmons. I think they should really take a book out of the Baltimore Ravens playbook, literally, and go to, it is basically what they're doing, using him as that big nickel safety, weak side linebacker, slot corner type of player. So role-wise, they are kind of doing this, but I would ask Isaiah Simmons to shed a good 10, even 15 pounds. He played much closer to 220 at Clemson than the 240 pounds they've asked him to play at and play at linebacker. At this point, it just isn't working for Isaiah Simmons as a true linebacker. That was a thought experiment of a former regime. Make him a safety again, because that's what he did at Clemson when he splashed, and he might not ever return value as that top 10 pick, but find a nice role for him where he can be a two-way player, defend the run. You can blitz him, where I want to say that, like, the other alternative is to have him gain 10 pounds and just convert him to edge, which would be another really fascinating thing, although that's pretty risky. But his best snaps this year have been getting after the quarterback, where he does have the length profile to do that. So that could maybe be a little Micah Parsons-esque experiment. But they're struggling to know what to do with him. I'm curious to see what this new staff wants to do with Isaiah Simmons. And then in the secondary, Marco Wilson and Antonio Hamilton, Coming into the year, we talked about these being the worst cornerback 2 and cornerback 3s in the league, and I'm not acting like they were incredible this year, but Marco Wilson finished really strong. He was on a good run. He went up 2 in our last episode of Studs and Duds, and unfortunately both him and Hamilton have been banged up and kind of had one last swan song against the Bucs on that Monday Night Football game where both these guys played really well, but Marco Wilson, it is just a mental thing and a confidence thing with him and an understanding of the game. So getting comfortable in year 2 of this system, he's played a lot of snaps at this point. You're seeing him blow a lot less coverages, getting his hands on the football more often. He's got double the amount of pass breakups, actually more than double than he had last year. 3 interceptions this season, 2 on Tom Brady himself. So I think you look at him as a starter next year for a team that needs a million different pieces. Marco Wilson is only, he's turning 24 next year, entering year 3. He is a ridiculous athlete. I love that side of his game coming out of Florida. I mean, he just moves differently than most corners in the league. So he is a player definitely worth continuing to give these opportunities. And he's shown enough to me that I'd keep developing him and see what he can turn into. And then Antonio Hamilton, I don't think, the upside and the future projection is quite as good for him, but as a 4th corner next year, sure. Like the fact that he was still playing good football late in the season after last year, some just embarrassing blown coverages, getting beat on double moves. I did think he was going to be the worst cornerback starting in the league week 1, and he wasn't. He was adequate this season. And that's commendable for a guy that's up there in age, that's bounced around the league, and is not known for his athletic traits. Next up, we have the red-hot San Francisco 49ers, the star of the month, an obvious one, Brock Purdy, the savior of San Francisco. Getting a +7 here. Fun fact, I had him rated pretty well for a 7th-round rookie, but obviously no one could have seen this coming. He has stepped in and played like a starting level quarterback. They really have not missed a beat without Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's just unfair to ask literally the last pick in the draft to lead a team on a Super Bowl run as a rookie. I'm just so infatuated to see if he can do it. I think when it comes to playing in rhythm in this offense, I went back and listened to my analysis of him because he did make my top 10 quarterbacks video. I even compared him to Jimmy Garoppolo there and said, as a backup, he can do all of that point guard stuff. And that's exactly what you've seen. And what's really encouraging is 2 out of the last 3 games, he's done a much better job taking care of the football. And then in that Raiders game, he did try to put the ball in harm's way a couple times, but strangely enough, in that game, the defense played really poor, and he had to press where he made some big throws. So we're still kind of learning what his upside might be, and this playoff run is going to be a big decider in that. That's all I'm really going to say. Let's watch some playoff football here, Brock. But he's getting plenty of help. That much is very obvious, really across the board. Everybody doing their job. The running backs, the receivers, the offensive line. So let's run through all these guys stepping up. Christian McCaffrey, this trade has been just so electric for this team, and I'm just so glad that I didn't really push back on this trade all that much. I said it kind of makes sense as like a last missing piece. And he's just been unlocked to a whole nother level, it feels like. I know he's played like this in Carolina, but there's just a certain it factor about him inside this offense. The way he sets up screens, the speed he has to the edge on these wide zone runs. I mean, you see him running over defenders, playing with the confidence to truck people in this offense. Not to mention the creative freedoms he provides as a improviser when plays break down in the receiving game. So he's all over the field, doing it as a runner, doing it as a receiver, getting closer to the 99 club for Christian McCaffrey. But it's not just him running the ball well. I could have included in the notes that Elijah Mitchell has been outstanding in his 80 snaps this season. Yeah, you heard that right. The guy that was supposed to be the day one starter for the Niners only has 80 snaps, but he's been awesome. But Jordan Mason as well. It's a name that those were paying attention to the Niners in the preseason were well aware of because he took the 3rd-round rookie Ty Davis Price. He took his job, and He's like bullying people at the goal line and fighting for tough yardage. He's provided a little bit of a size, power aspect that they don't necessarily get with Christian McCaffrey. And when Elijah Mitchell can't be in there, he's really looked the part. So he's going up 4 as an undrafted rookie at a Georgia Tech. And then Brandon Ayuk has really stepped up as this team's number 1 wide receiver with Deebo Samuel out. He has just, to me, reached new heights with his route running, his release, his consistency. He's incredibly reliable, just doing his job there. And then these tight ends, George Kittle. Don't really need to say anything about George Kittle. We know how great he is when healthy. He's made arguments to be the best tight end in the NFL, certainly the most complete tight end in the NFL when you factor in the blocking. But he's just on an absolute tear. He's been the focal point of the offense all of a sudden. Brock Purdy certainly loves targeting him, and he's shown that same athletic juice after the catch. So he's getting a lot of love back. We actually lowered him in the last episode because he just hadn't really been around doing as much. But Tyler Kroft as well, a nice free agent addition for the Niners here. They haven't really had a reliable tight end too as a run blocker, and he's come in as just that gritty veteran. He's well past the days of being paid as a free agent and being more of a, I don't want to say a household name, but a more well-known player. Well, he's just a total role player now and doing a really good job moving people up front for this incredible run game. And then the offensive line, particularly on the interior, coming into the year when I ranked the Niners 4th coming in, a lot of people said there's no way this interior offensive line is not going to be able to hold up. There's no way this team can be as good offensively after losing some guys there. But I'm not saying these guys are what Alex Mack and what's his name that signed with the Jets. His name's escaping me here. 30 teams into this series here this week. But yeah, they haven't been exactly the same, but all these guys are doing a really good job, and they've all held up much better in pass protection than you would expect. Daniel Brunskill, who's shown that he can play both right guard and left guard because Aaron Banks got hurt week 17, but Aaron Banks has played well. Year 2 for him has been very solid. And then Jake Brendel, the center, really out of nowhere. I gave Kyle Shanahan a lot of benefit of the doubt when I said I think Jake Brendel's probably going to be just fine because Shanahan has full faith in him, and I'm not going to question Shanahan's eye for the center position. And that's part of what makes Kyle Shanahan such an amazing head coach and offensive coordinator. But yeah, Brendel's been really solid. He's been a good kind of guy to just carry these wide zones in the run game, and he's been very solid as a pass protector. And then Mike McGlinchey as well has had a good year here. He is just a very almost matchup dependent tackle. He does have pass protecting losses out there that are pretty ugly. He can actually get top heavy because he's 6'8". He doesn't have the best core strength in my opinion. He's really athletic in his lower half, and that's why he is such a good run blocker. But he's done a good job sheltering those pass protection losses, and a big part of that is they do so much on early downs with the run game and the moving pockets that they don't have to go to as much traditional drop back stuff. But yeah, he's been pretty solid. Not going to go up because he's had his ups and downs, but he's playing well right now into the playoffs. And then defensively, just a lot of usual suspects here, plus Azeez Al-Shaair. Nick Bosa looks like he's going to run away with Defensive Player of the Year. He's approaching the 99 club in his best season of his career. Looking like a good take of mine to say in the offseason that the gap between him and Myles Garrett and anybody else as the number 1 edge rusher is virtually non-existent. And I made the case that Bosa should be mentioned as one of the best, not just one of, the actual best edge rusher in football, and he has been this year. So that's looking like a good take of mine. He's proved me, made me look good for that one. But Azeez Al-Shaair, he's a pending free agent in this loaded linebacker room and should be a nice signing for somebody. And they obviously aren't going to be able to afford him, but he's shown enough as their base linebacker that he's making a case to be a starter somewhere. So when he gets paid 3 years, $15 million, or 2 years, decent contract this offseason, don't be surprised. Dre Greenlaw as well has really balled out this season. It's funny. He had the worst game of his career in week 1 against the Bears. He's honestly probably the reason they lost that game. And then ever since then, he's been about a top 5 linebacker in the NFL. He's playing great football all season long, just doing it all, right? The sideline to sideline speed as a run defender, thumping between the tackles, showing coverage ability. He's awesome. And to have him as a number 2 is just an embarrassment of riches for the Niners defense. And then one more guy here, Charvarius Ward. They've actually had some struggles in the secondary across the board, really. You know, Diamador Lenore, who's gotten some love in this series for the month that he's playing, he's been getting picked apart. They've had a hard time kind of figuring out who else is going to be their starters in the secondary. Even Talanoa Hufanga has given up some big touchdowns here on this run. But Charvarius Ward, meanwhile, is locking down his side of things. He's been outstanding in this defense, and it's just a match made in heaven because Charvarius Ward might be one of the best press corners in the NFL as far as disrupting the first 3 seconds of any given receiver's route. And he plays behind a pass rush that way more often than not, they've already got home 3 seconds into the play. So it's just a perfect formula for success there, and it takes a lot of pressure off of everybody else because you can use them to take guys out. And, you know, if they didn't have this great pass rush, Charvarius Ward might be getting picked on a little bit, but he just doesn't allow any separation early in the route. And then we have the LA Rams, which are definitely a tough one to break down here because it's just a bunch of random frickin' players, a bunch of guys that probably won't be on the team next year because this has just been the season from hell for the LA Rams following up their Super Bowl. But hey, their young star running back Cam Akers looks healthy, looks like that juiced up young running back that as a rookie just kind of took the football world by storm. And then year 2 is not the same. He did not show the same juice, was unable to really be consistent for him. And this year, to begin the year, was more of the same. But the last month here, 3 straight games of 100 yards of offense, looking like that guy that was roaring into the playoffs in his rookie season. And hopefully this is the guy we're going to get from Cam Akers moving forward as he entering the 4th year of his contract. So it's going to be a contract year for Cam Akers next year. Then sticking with the offense, Tutu Atwell continues to contribute as a deep threat, showing that he can play a little bit. We don't need to dive into why he was picked in the 2nd round and why it took so long for him to become a thing, but it is good to see, him show off some of that deep threat ability and not dropping the ball and not getting bodied down the field because he's only 165 pounds. I don't know what this means for his future, what his role could be, but it's just good to see for now. Then the tight end room, Bryson Hopkins, a player I liked coming out, was actually my number 1 tight end in a really bad tight end class. He's finally getting an opportunity now, getting some catches, showing a little bit of something. And then Tyler Higbee, who we actually lowered in the last episode of Studs and Duds because he hadn't done jack diddly squat all year, turns it right back around in my face and starts to look like the old Tyler Higbee. So he's getting his overall point back. Then 3 veteran offensive linemen that I really don't feel like spending any time on because they're just old, and the Rams basically, when their offensive line fell apart, I think they just went to their pro scouts and said, who are the 3 best available linemen that we can sign right now? They picked them up, and those guys have actually played pretty well to their credit, but are these guys going to be starters next year for this team or someone else? I doubt it. And all of these guys have had their struggles as of late, could go right back to stinking. Matt Skura especially has had a really rough 2-year stretch after being viewed as maybe a potential starter in Miami. I don't know. Does that turn around again for him at 29 years old? I guess we'll find out. Ty Nsekhe maybe could be like a bridge starter for somebody, but he's going to be 37 years old. So I don't know how these tackles find the fountain of youth in LA, but it's fun to see, I guess. And then Coleman Shelton has played a little center, played a little guard all year, and he can play. I think he's just a good backup with some interior flexibility there. So they've fixed some of the massive issues that they've had on that offensive line, or at least they've stabilized it a little bit, putting some Band-Aids on it. And then also Van Jefferson. I like Van Jefferson. I've got him rated as a 75. He's been incredibly quiet all season long. But a couple games here the last few weeks, he's stood out and reminded us that he can win deep and be a good receiver in the NFL. Definitely got to see more of it from him, though, before we boost him back up. And then onto the defensive side of things, this is where it's really just like a bunch of role players. This is the way the Rams want to play defense. It's just a bunch of different bodies, a star-driven roster. But these guys have had to step up because those stars have been hurt in Aaron Donald. A couple of defensive ends up front. Marquise Copeland and Michael Hote have played well. Copeland, especially in run defense. Hote, a little more balanced, 3-down play. You know, these guys are day 3 picks, if not undrafted free agents. I think Hote is like 25, Copeland 26, something like that. Yeah, I mean, they're carving out roles as rotational pieces in their kind of 3-4 base packages. And yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to add on that other than good for them for making themselves some money as potential backups in the NFL. Kobe Durant, I will spend a little bit of time on. I loved this draft pick. I actually compared him to Darius Williams coming out and even have a tweet from way back when calling out that the Rams should spend a day 3 pick on Kobe Durant. And he's been starting lately. I've loved to see it. He comes out with a 2-interception game against the Broncos. Has really earned a starting opportunity. Also had a nice pass breakup against the Packers. But he did get picked on week 17, week 18 against the Chargers and the Seahawks. But for a day 3 corner to show some flashes, well, you know, maybe can get into the mix for competing for a starting job next year. That might be a bit of a stretch, but I've liked the flashes there from my dude Kobe Durant. Got the wrong name to be playing football. That's a basketball name right there. But Troy Hill, who we lowered 2 in the last episode, just like Tyler Higbee, shoved it back in my face and showed that he can still play. You know, I think he's an adequate low-end starter at corner. He's had another couple of good games to wrap up his season. And then speaking of Rapp, how about Taylor Rapp? You know, Rapp's had an interesting kind of run here. Like, coming into the year, he was sort of benched / they wanted to try out other people, but that didn't last long. And then honestly, out the gate to start the season, just wasn't very impactful as a safety. And then you see his snap count kind of go down a little bit, gets banged up, but then he comes back real strong right around, you know, like week 14, this time frame right here, and gets a couple of interceptions here. He's been a machine coming downhill as a tackler and has really stood out, and I think re-cemented himself as a starter in this league. And he's going to be a free agent. That may have been a part of kind of like why they were hesitant. They maybe wanted to get some of these younger guys some opportunities. But yeah, overall, he's just a really smart player. Typically, he's been really instinctive and been around the ball. He just definitely had a little bit of a slump last year and into this year, but I like what we're seeing there, and should be a fun player to follow, like what his next step is. I could definitely see him going elsewhere and being a starter somewhere else. And then Quentin Lake, another one of my guys as a day 3 kind of sleeper safety. He finally gets on the field. I think he's been hurt, but week 18 against the Seattle Seahawks, played a good game. He had what ended up going down as a pass breakup, was an interception that got turned around. But I love Quentin Lake. Go check out my draft analysis of him. Analysis of him. I think he was my number 10 safety for my top 10 safeties video, and a guy that I kind of was a little early on out the gate, and good to see him playing well. So there are your Rams. We got one team left, and that's going to be the Seattle Seahawks. And with a few good options, we're going to give the star of the month to rookie standout corner Tariq Woolen. And I've got into it with some Seahawks fans on Twitter for sure, because I said Sauce should be the runaway defensive rookie of the year. And I think Aiden Hutchinson would probably get the votes over Woolen, because he's also put up some, the pass rush stats typically get favored. But Woolen is having like a year that would normally be worthy of a defensive rookie of the year. It's just a really good year for rookie defenders, I guess. But man, is he fun to watch. The length, the speed. You can tell that he's a former receiver, because he just really, ever since like week 3, he's just felt extremely comfortable out there. Because I feel like early in the year, he was a little grabbier in phase. You could just a little bit of uncomfort out there, but not as the season's gone on. And it's just scary to think of like, what's the upside here? I think when you see him have to cover stop routes, in breakers, like he has not been a perfect corner, like closer to what like Sauce has been, if you want to get into that debate. But God, this guy's having an incredible season. He's been a top 10 corner in the NFL this year. You can't throw the ball deep on him. So if he develops some of that route processing, an ability to just get a little bit better at riding guys' hips and processing routes and take away some of those dig routes and the underneath stuff, like the sky is the limit for Tariq Woolen. And what a find in the freaking 6th round of the draft. Are you kidding me? I don't think the NFL is going to let, if a Tariq Woolen prospect exists again, who's 6'3" with 4.3 speed, I don't think the NFL is going to let him last that long in the draft again. It was actually the 5th round, not the 6th round, but the point still stands. Let's talk about the offense here that's certainly been more bad than good in this 5-week stretch here. And a lot of that comes back to Geno. Now, Geno's still playing well. We still have him rated very nicely as a 77, and I think he'll be back in Seattle next year. Also excited to see what he can do in playoff football. But there's no denying that the mistakes that he's kind of legendary for, putting the ball in harm's way, making questionable decisions once or twice a game, those have started to come back. Now, he's not full back to back up Geno Smith. No, he's like a good quarterback that's gonna sling it, give his receivers a chance. He still is making incredible throws, and the ball just is so pretty coming out of his hands. He throws a great spiral. He's got excellent ball placement down the field. So I'm not trying to take away from Geno Smith, even though I literally am giving him a -2, but perhaps just a little, pump the brakes moment on an incredible season out the gate that has slowed down for sure. These running backs are both going to go up. DJ Dallas is running hard, man. He's big. He's got acceleration through the hole. I like what he brings as a kind of short yardage and relief pitch option to Kenneth Walker. And Kenneth Walker's going to go up +3. I'm going to rave about Kenneth Walker. But the one thing I will say about him is he does have the occasional frustrating moment where he's trying to hit those home runs. And he's obviously capable of doing that. And you'll take some losses if you'll take a couple of negative 2-yard runs if he's capable of making a guy miss when he does kick it outside and turning it into a 60-yard gain. That was like Adrian Peterson was always known for that. So it is what it is with Kenneth Walker, and I think he knows that. Like, he's intentionally passing up potential 4 or 5-yard gains with good vision to just bounce it outside and see what he can do occasionally. And that was very much evident on his tape at Michigan State, by the way. But what I want to say is DJ Dallas is kind of the perfect guy to have if it is 3rd and 2, and maybe you want a guy that's just going to put his head down, find the hole, and pick up a yard or two. I think DJ Dallas might be a little better at that than Kenneth Walker. So a nice compliment there. And then Colby Parkinson, so fascinating to me. I liked Colby Parkinson coming out of Stanford. He was a bit of a draft crush of mine because he's 6'7". Stanford used him as a slot receiver, and he didn't really show that he was a bad contested catch guy. Far from it. He was really good at coming down with tough catches at Stanford. Just wasn't really like an inline player. But now in year 3 in Seattle, he has started to block better. He looks every bit a full-size tight end and some at 6'7". I don't know. I think there's something there, man. He's buried on this depth chart as their tight end 3, but every single time they call his number, he makes impressive catches. So he's entering year 4, and I would be targeting him. Like, if I was a team that needed a tight end, I know this upcoming tight end class is supposed to be pretty good, but Colby Parkinson was a 4th-round pick for Seattle. He's entering the last year of his contract. Would you offer a late 3rd or an early 4th-round pick for a Colby Parkinson and see if Seattle would bite and you can turn him into a starter? I see the traits, man, and the consistency's been there when they've called his number, so keep an eye out for him. Now, this offensive line really has met some of the preseason concerns that we had on them. And Charles Cross, it is what it is. He's had a rough end of season run here. He's still had a good season for a rookie tackle, and he's got a bright future ahead of him. But a little bit of pump the brakes on him, as he had kind of been locked down in that mid-season stretch, not so much down the home stretch these last 4 games. And Nick Bosa really gave him a kind of a okay, rookie, you're not quite there yet. Let me show you a couple things. We'll see how that matchup goes this weekend. But this guard situation's been interesting to monitor all year long. Phil Haynes has been trending up. He's a younger player out of Wake Forest that's never really gotten an opportunity as a full-time guard, but he's played well when given those opportunities, and he's been on the rise here throughout this series. And Gabe Jackson, the other way around, an aging veteran that's playing the worst football of his career. And I was just saying, like, why would you not just give, I've been saying, I should say, why not give Phil Haynes the full start and see how things go? Well, before that happens, he kind of turned into a pumpkin. Gets beat pretty bad by the Niners, and then week 16, Chris Jones and those guys for the Chiefs. Yeah, it was pretty freaking ugly. A PFF pass block grade of 0, by the way. 0. You grade out as a 0 and then get benched a week later by anybody, and that's alarming. So week 18, Pete Carroll and those guys say, well, that's enough of that. Take a seat, Phil. Now, I don't know if Phil Haynes was injured or whatever, but he did not play week 18. That was the first time he didn't play since week 4. So I'm not giving up on Phil Haynes. He's had a nice stretch of showings here, but definitely pump the brakes for him at the end of the year here. But it's not like Gabe Jackson is holding firm onto that job. The reason they've been rotating is because Gabe Jackson has struggled. And Gabe Jackson himself in the Niners game and the Jets game, really alarming. And hopefully that right guard position isn't going to be a total turnstile for the Seahawks. Now, Damian Lewis on the other side has played really well, and he's a guy coming into the year that did have questions about his pass protection. He's been a dominant run blocker out of LSU, but this year has been much more stable and reliable there, and he's trending towards getting a really nice contract extension in Seattle. He's a good guard. Maybe not a superstar, but a good player. Then we flip over and back to the defensive side of the ball. Quentin Jefferson, a veteran that has been one of their best, most reliable pass rushers, a 40 pressure season for the vet there. That's kind of what he's been. He goes all the way back to his existence on the Legion of Boom, and he's just kind of that pocket pushing pressure pass rush defensive tackle. He's had a good year. The Bills, once upon a time, paid him a handsome chunk of change to be a key player for them, and he's looking more like the player the Bills thought they were getting here in Seattle. Poona Ford, on the other hand, I love Poona Ford. He's one of the most unique builds in the league at 5'11", 340 pounds, but has not been his best season. And some of those size deficiencies, I think, have caught up to him a little bit this year. I think he is a guy that's shown he likes to shoot gaps, and he does what he can to shed and stack and play with that discipline. But when you are 5'11", you do kind of have to guess. And we've seen some big splash plays and big years from him. And I still think he's got good football ahead of him. But in this season, the amount of stops that he's been able to make has been cut down by about 30%. And you're just not seeing the same Poona Ford that we've seen the last couple of years. Just a guy that I think is going to be a little bit streaky throughout his career. But off the edge, these guys have really stepped up the last month of the season. Boye Mafe, maybe the big of which, finally kind of waking up. They spent a high second-round pick on him, the 40th pick in the draft, and he's been a goose egg this year, really. But these last 3 games, he's been making a case to get more playing time through his run defense. 5 defensive stops, really using that 265-pound frame to his advantage after they really needed that, because the Panthers they got the edge. They ran all over them to the corner. But you look at that Jets game, that's the way the Jets want to attack the Seahawks, is off the edge. And Boye Mafe, a much better job setting the edge. Specifically noticed that in that game because I was looking out for it, because I figured I had money on the Jets, and I was like, if they're going to win this, it's going to be tossing the ball to the outside, and really good job by Mafe setting the edge there and kept it up into the next week against the Rams with a couple more defensive stops. He also had a nice sack against the Rams. So they haven't gotten the impact they maybe hoped they would get from the 24-year-old rookie as the 40th pick in the draft. But everybody develops at their own rate, and we'll see what he can do next year. But these 2 starters really turning it on. I mean, Nwosu's just been a steady force all season long. He's up to a 10 sack, 60 pressure season. What a signing he was. They desperately needed a solid starter because Taylor has not been solid. Mafe has not been solid. Nobody else off the edge has been solid. They needed Uchenna Nwosu, who's been a factor against the run, dropping into coverage as a pass rusher. He's been outstanding. And then Darrell Taylor, who we lowered last episode of Studs and Duds, spins it right back around. He just can't decide if he wants to be good in the NFL or not. He's been just an absolute roller coaster ride since he got to the NFL. Now, he actually literally walks into a 10-sack season. Seahawks fans are going to overrate the crap out of that. I don't know if I've ever seen a 10-sack season from a player who had under 30 pressures in a season. That is just insane. Typically, you expect a player to convert around 20% of their pressures into sacks, not 45% like Darrell Taylor has done. Now, awesome game against the New York Jets. Very legit sacks in that specific game. Showing the juice and the pass rush moves off the edge, the bend, the athleticism. We've seen real flashes in small sample sizes from Darrell Taylor. But this dude literally got benched in the middle of the season because his efficiency fell off a cliff. So I don't know what to make of Darrell Taylor. You like that he ended his season strong, 5 sacks in his last 3 games. Again, a total of just 11 pressures in those 3 games, which is like an average rate there, with 8 coming against the New York Jets. Let's just watch him this weekend, and he's going to be a player that I can already tell I'm going to be talking down on him next year, and the Seahawks fans are going to be like, oh no, he had 10 sacks last year. There's my wife sneaking in at the end. I love you. But yeah, it'll be a fun conversation with Darrell Taylor for sure. And then the linebacker, Cody Barton, is on a really nice run, just playing solid, disciplined run defense over the middle of the field especially. But I'm a fan of Cody Barton's game. He's definitely a big, toolsy linebacker that's just kind of casually putting things together here for Seattle as a nice running mate to Jordan Brooks. And then the safety, Ryan Neal. Now, unfortunately, he got hurt. His season was cut short. I don't know if he's going to be out there for the playoffs or not, but he finished up his season before he got hurt, was already playing well, but finished up with an outstanding run of games against Carolina and against San Francisco, pair of pass breakups in both those games. The tackling in that Niners game, that's a tough team to tackle against. He missed a couple in that game, but overall, the course of the season, he's been a secure tackler, a good run defender. This is your classic 6'3", lengthy Seahawks strong safety, and he's been everything that they would have wanted Jamal Adams to be this year. That sounds maybe a little excessive, but it's true. If anything, Ryan Neal has shown better coverage than Jamal Adams has in his time in Seattle. I'm not saying he's going to take Jamal Adams' job, but it does make that conversation very fascinating. But he's going to go up 2 here, wrapping up his season. I don't think he's playing. He's missed the last 3 weeks, but maybe. And then Quandre Diggs is going to go up in that safety room as well. He finished up his season strong. Another just very good year for Quandre Diggs. Ends up with 4 picks on the season, I believe. And yeah, then the slot corner here, Kobe Bryant. I didn't realize we have a Kobe Durant and a actual Kobe Bryant in the NFC West. It's just very fascinating. Go Hoops. But Kobe Bryant has not been a great coverage slot corner, but has been all over the field as a run defending slot. I think there might be a future as a safety for Kobe Bryant. I loved his zone instincts at Cincinnati. I think we have seen plenty of games this season where he just doesn't have the game speed to keep up with some guys in the slot. But I will say his last 2 weeks of the season were his best 2 coverage games in a while. So big opportunity against the Niners, who love to attack that slot, short to intermediate part of the field. And that's all we've got. Voila, which has become the buzzword for the end of these videos. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you drop your comments down below on players you agree, disagree, or maybe felt were left off. One last reminder, make sure you do like the video if you're still here and you have not. Literally, what the hell are you doing? Give me a little support. Give me a little love. Hit that like button. And thank you.